Part 1 of Naruto. My system thinks I'm in One Piece. Chapter 1. Me taking on the Kaguya Clan? Seriously? Hey, did you hear? That assassination attempt on the Mizukage a while back, there's finally a conclusion. They're saying it was that demon Zabuza. The demon? You mean the guy who slaughtered all his classmates during graduation? Yeah, him. I heard he couldn't stand the Mizukage's bloody mist policies, so he took the risk and tried to assassinate him. As for the result, the Mizukage's strength isn't something you can just challenge. By the way, Senior Yusaku, what do you think? Inside the administrative office of the Hidden Mist Village, the end of the workday was approaching. With little left to do, the staff had begun whispering among themselves, indulging in idle gossip. When his name was suddenly called, Matsuda Yusaku frowned slightly and replied flatly, "What do I think? I look at it with my eyes." "Come on, Assistant Matsuda, weren't you Zabuza's senior? I heard you two were pretty close. Don't tell me you don't know even a little inside detail." "I don't know, not at all." Yusaku felt a jolt of alarm and immediately denied it. These people... Chatting is one thing, but do they have to bring up something this dangerous? Yes, he and Zabuza had been on good terms, but when it came to the assassination attempt, he truly hadn't known a thing beforehand. If someone with ulterior motives reported this to the Mizukage, his fate would be anything but pleasant. At that moment, the office abruptly fell silent. The chatter vanished as everyone lowered their heads and pretended to focus on their work. From deep within the office, the door to the department head's room opened. A middle-aged man stepped halfway out, his stern gaze sweeping across the room. "Yusaku, come here. I need to talk to you about something." "Yes, sir." Yusaku glanced at his watch. It was almost time to get off work, and yet he was being called in right now. No matter the world, bosses really had a talent for terrible timing. That's right, Yusaku wasn't originally from this world. He was a transmigrator. After an unfortunate encounter with a speeding truck, he woke up again, only to find himself reborn as an orphan in the Hidden Mist Village of the Land of Water. Born an orphan, no parents, no backing, just a house to his name. Mediocre talent, mediocre strength, no cheat abilities, and a future that looked bleak from the start. Worse still, he lived in the Bloody Mist Village. To graduate, he had been forced to kill a fellow student just to become a ninja. Not long after, the Third Shinobi World War broke out. He barely survived that war and made it to adulthood, only to end up as nothing more than an ordinary chūnin, a paper-pushing clerk in Kirigakura's administrative department. Stepping into the department head's office, Yusaku saw the man already seated behind his desk, lost in thought. Hearing him enter, the man gestured toward the chair in front. "Sit." After Yusaku took his seat, the man didn't get straight to the point. Instead, he began with small talk. "Yusaku, you've been working under me for quite a few years now, haven't you?" "Yes, sir. Since the end of the war, I've been under your supervision. A few years ago, when you were promoted, you brought me along as your assistant. Counting it all together, it's been nearly 10 years. "Nearly 10 years, the man murmured. "When I first met you, you were still just a kid. And now, all these years have passed. You're 22 this year, right?" "Yes, 22. A fine age. Your parents would have been glad to see you grow up safely." But the man, Hisashi, fell silent mid-sentence, a trace of melancholy surfacing on his face. A heavy, oppressive atmosphere settled over the room. Seeing this, a bad feeling rose in Yusaku's chest. "May I ask why you called me here, sir?" A flicker of struggle crossed Hisashi's face. In the end, he hardened his expression and spoke through clenched teeth. "The Mizukage has issued a mission. He specifically named you." "What?" Before Yusaku could respond further, Hisashi continued in a low, grave voice. "It's a direct order from the Mizukage himself. Recently, the Kaguya Clan has been growing restless. There are signs they may be planning a rebellion. You are to monitor them. And if the Kaguya clan truly shows signs of revolt, his tone turned cold. You are to act immediately and eliminate the threat before it can take root. Me? The words hit Yusaku like a thunderclap. His scalp tingled, his ears rang, and his mouth went dry. Me? Taking on the Kaguya clan? Are you serious? If you want me dead, just say it outright. At this point, he couldn't care less about decorum. Sir, you know me. I'm just a weak administrative ninja. How could I possibly stand against the Kaguya clan? You said it yourself. They're already on the verge of rebellion. If I go, won't I just be walking straight into their blades? A sacrifice to raise their banner? This wasn't a mission. It was a death sentence. A sudden realization flashed through Yusaku's eyes. Is this because of Zabuza? Has the Mizukage set his sights on me because of that? But I truly had no prior knowledge of his actions. Chūnin Yusaku, watch your tone, Hizashi snapped in a low voice. Do not speculate about the Mizukage. The mission you've been given is a direct command. There will be no questioning it, no refusal. I am not asking for your opinion. Yusaku's expression turned bitter. His lips parted, but no words came out. Zabuza, you really dragged me down with you. Fine, you wanted to assassinate someone, that's your business. But did you have to fail? Never in his wildest dreams had he expected to be implicated by Zabuza's actions. But Yusaku was a transmigrator. He knew the truth behind the shadows, that damned fourth Mizukage, and the one secretly controlling him, Obito. Sometimes Yusaku even wondered, had Obito, after losing the one he loved during the war, turned the hidden mist into this hellish slaughterhouse out of sheer madness? By the time Yusaku stepped out of the office, it was already past working hours. The department was empty now, save for a few night shift staff. Without the bustle of people, the place felt hollow, cold, eerie, suffocating. Dragging his heavy body out of the administrative building, Yusaku suddenly let out a self-mocking laugh. What kind of life was this? A chill crept into his bones. Other transmigrators dominated the world, surrounded by beauties, armed with systems, or born into powerful clans like the Uchiha or Senju, rising to the peak of the ninja world within years. And him? From beginning to end, he was nothing but cannon fodder. Weak, talentless, no bloodline limit, no cheat ability. He had struggled for over a decade, only to remain a mere chūnin. Compared to those dazzling protagonists, his life felt like a complete joke. And now, he had been handed a mission that was clearly a one-way trip to death. What should he do? Defect? The thought flashed through his mind, but he quickly shook his head. With his pitiful strength, he'd probably be hunted down by Kirigakure's hunter nin before he even made it out of the village. Was there really no way out for him? To hell with Obito, to hell with the Mizukage. Yusaku cursed bitterly, his heart sinking into despair. Like a walking corpse, he wandered through the empty streets, devoid of life. And just as hope reached its lowest point, a crisp, mechanical voice suddenly rang out in his mind. That cold, artificial sound struck him like heavenly music. Light returned to his eyes. A translucent blue panel appeared before him, and in that instant, it was as if he had come back to life. Abnormal emotional state in host. System loading. Loaded. Initializing. Complete. Beginning world scan. Chapter 2. The system says I'm in the One Piece world. Rushing back home, Yusaku shut the door and drew the curtains tight. He hurried into his bedroom without wasting a second and immediately opened the system. More than 10 years. For over a decade, he had thought he would live out an ordinary, uneventful life. And yet, at the very brink of death, his cheat ability had finally arrived. System. Sitting on the edge of his bed, Yusaku called out softly. A blue, translucent panel appeared before his eyes.
His heart surged with excitement, but he forced himself to calm down and focus. On the system's main interface, a block of text slowly emerged. Detection complete. Host is currently in the world of One Piece identity. Kuzan quest. Become a Marine Admiral task. Obtain a Devil Fruit armament haki. Yusaku tilted his head, confusion flooding his face. He rubbed his eyes and stared at the panel again. Not a hallucination. One Piece world? Marine Admiral? System, are you blind or just broken? I'm in the pirate world? This is the ninja world. This is the world of Naruto. And I'm not Aokiji either. Sure, his name was Yusaku Matsuda, but that was just a name. He had absolutely nothing to do with Kuzan. If he really had Kuzan's strength, would he still be trembling in fear like this? The text on the panel flickered and vanished, replaced by new lines. Confusion detected. Re-scanning. Confirmed as One Piece. Host identity confirmed as future Marine Admiral Kuzan. Errors detected. Yusaku nearly cursed out loud. Suppressing the irritation boiling inside him, he forced himself to ask again. System, are you sure there's no mistake? Mistake! Seeing those oversized exclamation marks, Yusaku pressed a hand to his forehead. After waiting more than a decade for his cheat ability, he ended up with a blind system. How was he supposed to survive this certain death mission now? No, he couldn't give up yet. Yusaku pulled himself together and asked again, several times. But the answer never changed. Mistake! Host is in the One Piece world. Identity, Admiral Kuzan. At that moment, he finally understood. This system that arrived over 10 years late wasn't just blind, it was downright brain dead. It's over. I'm dead for sure, he muttered under his breath, eyes dull, yet still unwilling to give up as he began browsing through all the system's functions. The interface was extremely simple. It was purely a mission-based system. Opening the task panel revealed a long list of side quests under Monkey D. Garp, Borsellino, Sakazuki, Kaido, Charlotte Linlin, and many more. The rewards were incredibly tempting. Powers return, haki, strength, physical constitution. Yusaku's eyes practically burned with desire. But at the same time, it was pure agony. This was the ninja world, not the pirate world. Where was he supposed to find Garp to train under? How was he supposed to defeat Sakazuki? All these rewards were right in front of him, yet completely out of reach. Seeing them only made it worse. And more importantly, system, where's my beginner gift pack? There was nothing. Isn't there usually a starter gift for transmigrators? Something to help kick things off? Where's mine? That short, decisive reply nearly made Yusaku cry. Yeah, figures. He had only just obtained the system, but judging by its blind behavior, this outcome wasn't surprising. He had thought this would be his turning point. Instead, after all that excitement, he gained absolutely nothing. Looks like he really was doomed. Yusaku let out a long sigh, his heart sinking into desolation. As the initial thrill of gaining a system faded away, a different sensation crept in. Hunger. A dull ache spread through his stomach. He had no mood to cook at a time like this. Reaching over to the bedside table, Yusaku grabbed an apple and took a couple of careless bites, just enough to fill his stomach. The moment he bit down and swallowed, the system's cold, mechanical voice rang out again. New text appeared on the panel. Host, for consuming a devil fruit. You have obtained the Logia-type Ice Fruit ability. Completed. Reward issued. Please check. Yusaku shot to his feet, blinking in disbelief. Before he could even ask anything, a surge of power erupted from within his body. Huh? The reward! It clicked instantly. Sure, the system might be blind, but what if the reward was real? Not daring to waste a second, Yusaku focused inward, carefully sensing the unfamiliar power flowing through him, something completely different from chakra. A moment later, a hint of joy surfaced on his face. He slowly raised his right hand and clenched it into a fist. With a thought, an invisible force wrapped around it.
The excitement in Yusaku's eyes intensified. He glanced around the room and spotted a potted plant by the window. Walking over, he casually threw a light punch at the ceramic pot. Crash! The pot shattered instantly, dirt scattering across the windowsill, the plant toppling to the ground. The system's hockey! It's real! That punch hadn't carried any force at all. It had barely touched the pot. Under normal circumstances, it would have done nothing more than nudge it slightly. But now it had exploded into pieces. Just as he thought, even a flawed system wouldn't be completely useless. With this, his strength had at least improved somewhat. His chances of survival had just increased significantly. Then, suddenly, he froze. As if realizing something, he quickly turned back to the system and opened his personal status panel.
Kuzan rank, Marine Lieutenant Colonel. Abilities, Armament Hockey, Ice Fruit. Constitution, 2 Ice Fruit. Ignoring everything else, his eyes locked onto the abilities section. Then he looked down at the apple still in his hand. A sharp glint flashed in his eyes. He slowly extended his hand, staring intently at his palm. With a single thought, whoosh! The temperature in the bedroom plummeted as if winter had arrived overnight. Yet Yusaku didn't notice at all. His full attention was fixed on his hand. Before his eyes, ice began forming out of thin air, encasing his palm completely. Even though his hand was trapped in solid ice, he felt no cold whatsoever. It's real. It's really the ice fruit. He clenched his hand, shattering the ice, and a wave of overwhelming joy surged through him, like being reborn.
I have power now? Looks like my life isn't over just yet. After the rush of emotion subsided, a brilliant light returned to his eyes. System, you're right, absolutely right. I am in the pirate world. I'm going to become a Marine Admiral. In a few quick bites, he finished off the apple, core and all. Only then did he notice his entire room was covered in frost. Even the bed was blanketed in white. That must be from the cold leaking out when I activated my ability. As he spoke, a puff of white mist escaped his lips, proof of the freezing temperature. Yet he felt no discomfort. In fact, he felt incredibly at ease. Wait, a thought struck him. He grabbed his little finger and bent it sharply. Crack! The finger snapped clean off, yet he felt no pain whatsoever. Looking down, the cross-section of the broken finger showed no flesh or bone, only clear crystalline ice. He dropped the severed finger to the ground. It shattered into fragments, scattering like crushed ice. Reform! With a thought, cold energy spread outward. At the broken joint, layers of ice began to form. In the blink of an eye, the ice reshaped itself, reforming his little finger completely. His hand was restored as if nothing had happened. He clenched his fist. Perfectly normal. No difference at all from before. Even the tiny scars on his fingers from past training with shuriken were exactly the same. Elementalization! Chapter 3. Mei Terumi. Feeling the power of the ice fruit coursing through him, especially the sheer absurdity of elementalization, Yusaku was overwhelmed with excitement. He didn't stop there. One by one, he began testing his limits. First his arms, then his legs, his torso, even his head. He snapped, shattered, and dismantled his own body piece by piece. And no matter what form he reduced himself to, he was completely unharmed. Even when he broke into fragments, reduced to nothing but a pile of crushed ice, he could instantly reform back to normal. This is elementalization. Among Logia-type abilities, this was the ultimate, near-invincible power.
Everyone knew ninjas were fragile, but now, with this ability, physical attacks were essentially meaningless against him. Unless it was some rare specialized technique, no one in the entire ninja world could even touch him. A confident smile spread across Yusaku's face. He turned his gaze toward the direction of the Mizukage's office building, the corners of his lips curling into something dangerous. Mizukage. And Obito, just you wait. From today onward, the tables have turned. They had schemed against him so recklessly, but he wasn't the type to suffer in silence. After playing around with his ice fruit abilities for quite some time, his body suddenly went weak. He nearly collapsed. An overwhelming hunger surged up from his stomach, which began growling loudly. "I'm starving." Clutching his abdomen, Yusaku hurried over to the bedside cabinet. There were still a few apples left. As he reached for one, a thought crossed his mind. He paused, hesitated for a moment, then took a bite. But his eyes remained fixed on the system panel. He waited, swallowed. Nothing. No notification appeared. Only then did he relax and quickly devour the remaining apples. A bit of strength returned to him. The hunger was still there, gnawing at him, but at least it wasn't as unbearable as before. Looks like eating just any apple won't grant another devil fruit ability. As far as he knew, an ordinary person could only consume one devil fruit. If someone tried to eat a second, the devils within would clash, killing the user instantly. Well, except for one exception, Marshall D. Teach. For a moment, Yusaku felt both relieved and slightly disappointed. It seemed he wouldn't be becoming some multi-fruit monster like Blackbeard. Thinking about it, that earlier incident, gaining a devil fruit ability from a single apple, was probably just a system bug. Having one ability was already incredibly lucky. More than that might not be a blessing at all. Yusaku got up and walked into the kitchen, opening the fridge. As he started eating whatever cooked food he could find, he glanced back at the system. System? What exactly happened just now? I clearly ate an apple, so why did I gain the ice fruit ability? Host consumed the Logia type ice fruit. It was not an ordinary apple. Seriously? Fine, if you say so. Yusaku had figured it out by now. His system wasn't just blind, it was stubborn too. Thankfully, it still worked. System, you're absolutely right. I am Admiral Aokiji, Kuzan. Confirmed. Yeah, totally correct. Not a single mistake, he muttered dryly. He swept through the fridge like a storm, vegetables, fruits, rice balls, even soldier pills, devouring everything in sight. Only after all that did he finally feel something close to full. The fridge was now more than half empty. About 70% full. He frowned slightly. Even at his hungriest, he hadn't expected to eat this much. Under normal circumstances, that amount of food would have lasted him several days, especially the soldier pills. Terrible taste, but absolute energy bombs. Am I going to end up like those monsters in the pirate world, with insane appetites? Whatever. Eating more isn't a bad thing. Money didn't matter anymore. With his strength restored, Yusaku returned to his bedroom, nudging aside the scattered ice shards on the floor with his foot. He walked to the wardrobe and pulled out a dark overcoat, a knit cap, and a white shirt. After getting dressed, he found a pair of round sunglasses in the bedside drawer. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, he looked himself over and nodded repeatedly. Not bad. I've got the vibe. He was naturally tall. While not the exaggerated 3 or 4 meters common in the pirate world, he still stood at a solid 1.9 meters. Years of training had given him a lean, well-defined physique, not overly bulky, but clearly powerful. The kind that looked slim in clothes, yet muscular underneath. With his slightly gaunt face, faintly wavy hair, and now the cap and sunglasses, he bore an uncanny resemblance to Kuzan. No, if anything, he looked even more like Kuzan's real-world inspiration, the actor Yusaku Matsuda.
Ara, looking pretty handsome. Who's the handsome guy? That's right, you are. Mimicking Kuzan's lazy tone, Yusaku couldn't help but grin at his reflection. Just as he was striking poses in front of the mirror, ding-dong, the doorbell rang. At a time like this, who would come looking for a man marked for death? Yusaka mentally ran through his acquaintances, then suddenly paused. Zabuza? He remembered that during the Kaguya Clan's rebellion, the young boy by Zabuza's side, Haku, had once met Kimimaro of the Kaguya Clan. And right now, with the clan on the verge of revolt, it was possible Zabuza hadn't fled the village yet. If it really was him, why come here? Could it be that he knew he had implicated Yusaku and came to bring him along as a rogue ninja? Thinking about it carefully, that actually sounded plausible. At least the guy has some conscience. But when Yusaku opened the door, the person standing outside made him freeze in surprise. It wasn't Zabuza. It wasn't even a man. It was a young woman. She stood tall, with a graceful yet curvaceous figure, dressed in a teal-blue dress that left her shoulders bare, revealing smooth, fair skin. Her face was soft and well-shaped, her features delicate. Long, reddish-brown hair framed her youthful appearance, and her jade-green eyes were currently sizing Yusaku up from head to toe. Yusaku, right? You've changed quite a bit since your academy days. Yusaku frowned slightly, then recognition dawned. May? The woman nodded, a bright, blooming smile spreading across her face. Didn't expect you to still remember an old classmate after all this time. She was none other than Mei Terumi. Of course I remember, Yusaku replied. You were one of the village's most famous prodigies. In the original story, Mei Terumi would become the Mizukage of Kirigakure, a powerful shinobi with dual Kekkai Genkai, someone who even fought Madara Uchiha head-on. Though she suffered heavily in that battle, the very fact she survived spoke volumes about her strength. As for Yusaku and her, they could be called acquaintances, nothing more, not close. Back in the academy, they had been in the same class. At the time, Yusaku had even thought about clinging to her for support, but his talent was simply too poor. Compared to Mei, who had been gifted since childhood, they existed on completely different levels. He wouldn't even have known how to approach her, let alone ingratiate himself. After graduation, the gap between them became even clearer. One was a gifted genius with a strong background and protection from powerful figures. The other, just another disposable genin churned out by the system with no backing whatsoever. There was no intersection between their worlds. Even after the war, the few times they met were only because Mei came to the administrative department for paperwork. Looking at Mei now, standing at his door, Yusaku could tell at a glance she had dressed up deliberately before coming. An old classmate he wasn't even close to, showing up suddenly, dressed like this? What exactly did she want? Chapter 4, The Still Blind System. So, an old classmate drops by to see you, and you're not even going to invite me in? Standing at the doorway, Mei Terumi wore a bright, charming smile. But as her gaze swept over Yusaku, there was something deeper beneath it, analyzing, measuring. Through his sunglasses, Yusaku calmly observed her expression. It looked warm and friendly on the surface, but he could tell at a glance it was just a polite social smile. Even the future 5th Mizukage still lacked a bit of polish. Not warm enough. The acting needed work. He was just about to step aside when his expression suddenly sharpened. His body remained planted firmly in the doorway, unmoving. A chill crept into his tone. How do you know where I live? By Kirigakure's confidentiality rules, a ninja's personal information was strictly restricted. Only their superiors and the Mizukage had access. Even someone like Mei, a recognized prodigy and a jonin with voting rights, shouldn't have known this without holding a specific official post. Mei didn't seem bothered. You're quite cautious. I got it from Lord Genji. Genji? Then it made sense.
Yusaku's expression relaxed slightly. He turned and walked inside, waving casually. "Come in." Genji was one of Kirigakure's elders, a veteran figure who had stood as a pillar of the village since its founding under the first Mizukage. Over the years, he had assisted multiple Mizukage, holding immense authority, second only to the village leader himself. Even the administrative department Yusaku worked in ultimately fell under his oversight, and Yusaku, barely, could be considered part of Genji's faction, though in truth, he was just a nobody on the very fringes. Mei stepped inside with a soft smile and followed him into the living room. The moment she entered, a wave of cold air hit her. She shivered involuntarily. Why is it so cold in here? Compared to outside, it's like stepping into winter. Her light clothing offered little protection. Goosebumps rose across her exposed skin as the chill seeped in. By her estimation, there was at least a 10-degree difference between inside and outside. If she weren't a trained ninja, the sudden drop might have been unbearable. Her eyes flickered toward Yusaku, sharp with curiosity. Low-temperature techniques. In Kirigakure, there was only one known ability capable of producing such cold, the ice release of the Yuki clan. But ever since the fourth Mizukage's bloody reign began, the Yuki clan had been persecuted almost to extinction. Could Yusaku possess their bloodline? It wasn't impossible. "Sit wherever you like." Yusaku gestured toward the sofa, then walked to a nearby cabinet. Without turning around, he asked casually, "What would you like? Coffee, tea, or alcohol?" "Alcohol," Mei replied, taking a seat as she glanced around the room. "What do you have?" "Gin." Yusaku opened the cabinet. At that exact moment, a system notification suddenly rang in his mind. Host interacting with target. Gion. Issuing side quests. Quest 1. Defeat Gion. Reward, Mastery of 6 Powers, Soru. Quest 2. Conquer Gion. Reward, Enhanced Lower Body Endurance. Yusaku glanced at it and immediately closed the interface. Yep, still blind. Not only did it misidentify him, it even mistook Mei for Gion. Wait, hold on. What exactly did it mean by lower body endurance? The corner of Yusaku's mouth twitched. He forcefully suppressed the urge to rant. So not only was his system blind, it was also completely shameless. Shaking his head, he ignored it and pulled out a bottle of gin along with 2 glasses, setting them on the table. "I don't get visitors often. Everything here is just what I personally like." Mei glanced at the bottle. It had already been opened, only half remained. "You like this kind of drink?" "This is the coolest kind of drink," Yusaku said with a grin. Whenever he thought of gin, he couldn't help but recall a certain overworked professional from an organization full of traitors, especially that moment from his childhood memories when the man shot himself just to stay conscious. That alone had earned Yusaku's admiration. Oh, and by the way, the most beautiful drink is sherry. Mei tilted her head slightly, clearly not understanding. "Don't mind it, just my personal opinion." Yusaku twisted open the cap, about to pour, then paused. "Want ice?" "Yes." Yusaku nodded. Back when he used to watch the anime, he already had a rough idea of Mei Terumi's personality. Now that he was facing her in person, it matched perfectly, decisive, assertive, and not someone easily led. After pouring the drinks, he casually picked up one of the glasses. With a light squeeze, condensation instantly formed across its surface, followed by a thin layer of frost. Mei had been watching his every move. The moment she saw it, her earlier suspicion solidified. As expected. Ice release. Then she paused, a flicker of surprise crossing her mind. Even ice release required hand seals, but just now, Yusaku hadn't formed a single seal. Chakra nature transformation? No. She shook her head inwardly. Compared to nature transformation, what he had just displayed looked more like a no-seal technique. As far as she knew, even Minato Namikaze had developed an incredibly powerful technique that required no hand seals. Could it be that Yusaku had done something similar? But that didn't make sense. Based on everything she knew about him, academy records, mission files, he had never shown any sign of possessing a Kekkei Genkai like ice release, nor any ability resembling a no-seal technique. Back in their academy days, he had been utterly ordinary, mediocre talent, average strength. If not for the fact that so few of their generation had survived the war, and that she had run into him a few times in the administrative department, she might not even remember his name. So what was it? A recent awakening? Or had he been hiding his abilities all along? Suppressing her surprise, Mei's expression shifted into thoughtful calm. The more she considered it, the more plausible it seemed. After all, surviving the battlefield wasn't something you could do without a few hidden tricks. But then, another question surfaced. Why is he showing this to me now? She accepted the glass Yusaku handed her. The chill from it spread instantly through her fingers. Looking up, she gave him a faint smile. "Thank you."
"You're a guest." Yusaku took a sip, then set his glass down, his gaze settling calmly on her. "Go on." "We're not close, so why would you suddenly come looking for an old classmate you haven't spoken to in years?" "Can't it just be a whim?" Mei replied, meeting his eyes without backing down, her polite smile still firmly in place. "After the war, there aren't many of our classmates left alive." Yusaku let out a soft scoff, as if. If that were the case, why hadn't he ever come to reconnect before? And yet now, on the very day he received a mission that was basically a death sentence, she showed up at his door? If there wasn't another motive behind this, he'd eat the table in front of him. Seeing the undisguised skepticism on his face, Mei remained perfectly composed, though inwardly she sighed. He's not easy to fool. "All right," she said at last. "I'll be direct. I heard you were assigned a new mission. The Mizukage personally ordered you to monitor the Kaguya Clan. Recently, the Kaguya Clan has been growing restless, planning rebellion. The lower ranks might not know much, but it's no secret among those with eyes in the village. With your strength, taking on a mission like that," she paused slightly, her tone turning heavier, "there's no way you wouldn't be noticed. And once you are..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Chapter 5. Yusaku's Intentions. "So what? You came all this way just to tell me that?" Hearing Mei Terumi's explanation, Yusaku paused mid-motion with his glass and shot her a sideways glance. "Or did you come because you think I'm about to die? So you decided to see off an old classmate?" "Of course not." Mei shook her head lightly. She had come with a purpose, but after witnessing the ice release-like ability and that seal-less technique Yusaku displayed, her original plan had shifted. Before she could continue, Yusaku suddenly asked, "This mission was personally issued by the Mizukage. It should be top secret. How did you find out? Let me guess, Genji again?" "Yes and no," she nodded. Yusaku frowned. What kind of answer was that? Yes or no? "When did you start talking like a bureaucrat?" he said dryly. "That kind of vague answer, that's exactly how we dodge sensitive questions in the administrative department." Mei suddenly laughed. "You people in administration even have techniques like that?" "Of course. The Assassination Corps, Mission Department, Medical Division, they all have their own codes and signals." "Why wouldn't we?" He waved a hand impatiently. "Stop dodging. What do you mean by that answer?" Mei studied him quietly. From the moment she stepped inside, she had noticed something, a strange sense of ease. This wasn't how someone facing a certain death mission should behave. He should have been anxious, uneasy. But Yusaku showed none of it. No panic, no tension. Even when speaking to her, a jonin, his tone carried no trace of deference. It was almost casual. So that's it. That confidence comes from his strength. In the ninja world, hierarchy mattered, but strength mattered more. And those with power were granted far greater leeway.
Mei finally explained. I found out by coincidence, or rather with Lord Genji's tacit approval. You know your department head, Hisashi, right? He's one of Genji's people. Yusaku nodded. Of course he knew. With the fourth Mizukage's condition, clearly under genjutsu, there was no way he could properly handle administrative affairs. And the one manipulating him behind the scenes, Obito Uchiha, was even less likely to deal with tedious paperwork. Naturally, most of the administrative power had flowed into Genji's hands, and Hisashi had become department head largely because he belonged to that faction. Mei continued. After receiving the mission from the Mizukage, Hisashi immediately went to Genji, hoping he could smooth things over, maybe get the order revoked. Don't let his stern appearance fool you. He's actually soft-hearted. He didn't want to see a subordinate who's worked under him for years sent to die. Yusaku raised an eyebrow, his expression softening slightly. So the old man did have some conscience. At least all those years of running errands for him hadn't been entirely meaningless. But the mission still ended up in my hands, Yusaku said, so his efforts failed. Correct, Mei nodded. She lifted her glass but didn't drink, instead letting the cold seep into her palm, sharpening her thoughts. When he went to Genji, I happened to be there discussing something. I overheard their conversation. Genji said, after Zabuza's assassination attempt, and with the Kaguya Clan showing signs of rebellion, this is a very sensitive time. Even he can't afford to provoke the Mizukage right now. If the Mizukage were to lose his temper, the entire village's situation would only become worse. Yusaku let out a short, mocking laugh. So the big shots decided to just give up on me? Absolutely not, Mei answered immediately. She met his gaze directly, her expression sincere, though deep down she felt a flicker of unease. I came here for a reason, didn't I? To give you a way out. In the original plan, Yusaku was as good as dead. Mei's visit today had never been about simply seeing an old classmate one last time after overhearing Genji's conversation. She had come under Genji's instructions to pass along certain directives, to make sure that, before dying, Yusaku could still squeeze out some final value and complete a few tasks for Genji. But everything changed the moment she saw what he had displayed. That ice-release bloodline, that seal-less technique. She overturned the entire plan on the spot. Someone like this, dying as collateral damage under the Misukage's paranoia, would be an unforgivable waste. Kirigakure was already suffering from a severe shortage of talent, and a large part of that was due to the Mizukage's brutal policies. Weak ninjas? They simply died. Strong ones? They killed the hunter nin sent after them and defected. Ever since the rise of the fourth Mizukage, Yagura Karatachi, the village hadn't been revitalized. If anything, it had been hollowed out. If not for the Land of Water's geographic isolation, Kirigakure might have already fallen from the ranks of the 5 great nations. Thinking this, Mei let out a quiet sigh. With her talent and the backing of Genji, it was only a matter of time before she became the next Mizukage. And when that day came, she had no intention of inheriting a broken, dying village. As for the original plan, it had only ever been a minor move, a disposable piece on the board. If it worked, good. If not, no real loss. And she was certain, if Genji himself had seen what Yusaku just demonstrated, he would have made the same decision. Then suddenly, Mei's expression shifted. A thought struck her. Yusaku had deliberately shown off his abilities in front of her just now. Could it be this had been his intention all along? But then, how could he possibly have known she would come today? Before her thoughts could settle, Yusaku spoke again, instantly shattering her suspicion. A way out, you say? He lifted his glass and downed it in one go. The dry, sharp taste burst across his tongue, laced with a faint citrus note, before sliding down his throat. Setting the glass on the table, he looked at her through his lenses. A strong, unmistakable confidence appeared on his face. I don't need you to show me the way. My eyes aren't blind. I can see my path clearly, clearer than ever before. May's brows furrowed slightly. A trace of seriousness entered her gaze. If he wasn't planning to rely on her, then what path was he talking about? She recalled the information she had reviewed before coming here. According to the records, Yusaku had been closely associated with the man who recently attempted to assassinate the Mizukage, Zabuza Momochi. Could it be he's already made contact with Zabuza, planning to defect together? Maintaining her composure, May asked calmly, "What exactly are you planning to do?" "Sorry," Yusaku replied with a faint smile, shaking his head. No comment. The moment he said that, May's expression subtly stiffened, turning slightly unpleasant. After a brief pause, Yusaku continued, "You mentioned earlier that you have some connections through Genji?" Chapter 6. Not Authorized to Tell. Hearing Yusaku's request, Mei Terumi's expression gradually relaxed. Of course she had connections with Genji. More than that, she was one of the core figures within his faction. She took a sip of her drink, straightened her back, and looked at Yusaku with a faint, knowing smile. So, that confidence earlier. In the end, wasn't it just about showing off his abilities to earn their protection? You want to meet Lord Genji? Exactly. Yusaku nodded. Now that he had the system and had gained the power of the ice fruit along with armament haki, his strength had risen significantly. The next step was to personally settle accounts with the two humanoid disasters who had pushed him to this point. He would demand an explanation, face to face. That said, he wasn't reckless. He knew just how deep the waters of the ninja world ran. His current strength might put him slightly above an average jonin, but against the true monsters lurking behind the scenes, it was still far from enough, and fighting alone was never wise. If he wanted to ensure survival, finding an ally was the smarter move. May's sudden visit had come at the perfect time. May set her glass down and spoke plainly. "If you have something to say, tell me. I'll pass it on to Lord Genji." "You won't do." Yusaku studied her for a moment, then slowly shook his head. "I already said it. This isn't something you're authorized to know. What I have to say is too important. It has to be delivered to Genji in person." May might be a good potential ally, but she was still young, and her influence within Kirigakure was limited. Compared to her, Yusaku's real target was the man behind her, Genji. With the right leverage, he was confident he could persuade the elder who had devoted his entire life to the village. Seeing the faint trace of dismissal on Yusaku's face, May's brows knit together. A flicker of anger rose within her. "So I'm being looked down on now? So what, you think a jonin like me isn't qualified? Or do you think I don't have a voice in this village?" Yusaku let out a quiet, mocking chuckle. "A jonin is enough? If you really had influence, would Kirigakure have been allowed to fall into this state under the fourth Mizukage?" At the mention of the fourth Mizukage, Yagura Karatachi, May fell silent. Because it was true. Her talent, her dual Kekkei Genkai, her jonin status, they all looked impressive. But in front of the Mizukage, they meant nothing. If not for Genji's protection, her fate might have been even worse than that of the persecuted Yuki clan. Then suddenly, she caught the deeper meaning in Yusaku's words. "What you want to say, does it involve the Mizukage?" "You're not authorized to know," Yusaku answered calmly. And yet, that refusal only confirmed her suspicion further. Her expression turned serious. "Can you guarantee that what you want to tell Genji is truly important?" "If it wasn't, would I bother going to him?" Yusaku shot back. May studied his face carefully. There was no sign of deception. If anything, the calm certainty in his eyes only strengthened her belief. Still, that attitude of "you're not worthy of knowing" irritated her even more. "So whether I came today or not," she asked, voice sharpening slightly, "you were planning to find Genji anyway?" Yusaku caught a hint of edge in her tone, but didn't dwell on it. He simply nodded. Exactly. Her arrival had been completely unexpected. As for showing off his ice fruit ability earlier, that had only been to give weight to his words. With Mei as a bridge, Genji would be more inclined to take him seriously. Given that the matter might involve the Mizukage, Mei had no room to act on impulse. "Fine," she said decisively, rising to her feet. "I'll take you to see Lord Genji." She turned and headed for the door without hesitation. After 2 steps, she paused, glancing back at him with a sharp warning. "Let me be clear. If what you say isn't as important as you claim, even if Genji lets you off, I won't." Yusaku met her gaze, utterly unfazed. "Don't worry. It's far more important than you can imagine." Yusaku casually grabbed the half-finished bottle of gin and followed Mei Terumi out the door. His house was a traditional single-family home, though the exterior carried the distinct architectural style of Kirigakure. It had been left to him by his parents. The moment they stepped outside, they noticed the neighboring door slightly ajar. A woman in her 30s peeked out. She was thin, her cheeks hollow, with a lingering sadness etched into her features. Her expression was tense, a mix of wariness and unease, as she looked toward Yusaku's house. When she saw him, and then noticed Mei standing beside him, her face turned pale, fear flashing across her eyes. Even so, she gathered her courage and spoke. "Yusaku, I heard some noise from your house just now. Are you—" "Good evening, Sister Sawamura." Yusaku raised a hand with a relaxed smile. Seeing her worried expression, he immediately understood and reassured her. "No need to worry. I'm just heading out with an old classmate tonight. Nothing serious. You should get some rest, too. Who knows, maybe when you wake up tomorrow, the village's heavy fog will finally clear." Hearing that, some color returned to her face. "Then, be careful." After giving him a few more reminders, she retreated back inside. Click. The door shut firmly. Yusaku withdrew his gaze and let out a quiet sigh. Looking out at the empty nighttime streets, he tilted his head toward Mei. "I don't know where Genji lives. I'll have to trouble you to lead the way." "Follow me." Mei gestured and walked ahead. After leaving the narrow residential street, the two stepped onto a wider main road. Though Kirigakure was a ninja village, its infrastructure was surprisingly modern. Households had electricity and appliances, and overhead wires stretched across the streets. Streetlights glowed steadily, illuminating the damp roads beneath. As they walked side by side, the shifting light cast alternating shadows across their faces. After a moment, Mei spoke. "I didn't expect you to be so well regarded by your neighbors. When I came earlier, I saw that woman peeking through her door, watching your place. The moment she noticed me, she hid, but I could tell she came back out afterward, watching me enter your house, looking extremely nervous." She glanced at him. "That's quite a lot of concern for just a neighbor, isn't it?" Yusaku sighed again. "Not really well regarded, just neighbors helping each other out. I've known their family for years. I even knew her husband before he passed, so I've taken a bit more care of them, that's all." If Mei's observation was accurate, then Sawamura must have heard the noise from earlier when he was testing the ice fruit. Even though he had tried to keep it controlled, the commotion hadn't been small. Worried about him, she must have kept checking on his house, and when Mei suddenly showed up, it was only natural she would become tense. Chapter 7. The fog is about to lift. Night in Kirigakure felt even quieter than the day. The streetlights were bright, yet they couldn't pierce through the ever-present mist. Instead, the glow only deepened the sense of suffocation and lifeless stillness. Thinking back to the fear and worry on his neighbor's face earlier, Yusaku raised the bottle and took another swig. The bitter, fragrant liquor slid down his throat. Behind his sunglasses, his expression seemed weighed down by something heavier than before. Beside him, Mei Terumi glanced over. "You're about to meet Lord Genji. Try not to get drunk." Yusaku didn't respond. He simply swirled the bottle in his hand, the liquid sloshing softly inside. After a few seconds, he finally spoke. "Do you know that neighbor of mine from earlier?" "No, I've never seen her." "Figures." Yusaku gave a faint nod. Someone like you, a prodigy, famous throughout the village, with a bright future ahead, why would you pay attention to the trivial lives of ordinary people? May's brows furrowed. What exactly are you trying to say? There was a hint of irritation in her voice. Was he implying she was detached, that she looked down on common people?
Nothing. Yusaku shook his head, but that only made her more annoyed. Earlier, he had already spoken to her with a certain dismissiveness, and now this? For a moment, she even felt the urge to unleash her lava release and melt him on the spot. Her expression darkened, but she forcefully suppressed her temper. If you don't want to say it, then don't. They walked in silence for a while. Yusaku took another drink, exhaling a faint stream of cold mist as he spoke again. My neighbor. She lives alone with her younger son now. Just the two of them, relying on each other in this village? May shot him an annoyed look. So now you do want to talk? I was just organizing my thoughts earlier. His voice was quieter now, heavier. Her husband was a few years older than me. Back when he was alive, he treated me well.
But then the Third Shinobi War broke out. He wasn't lucky. He died on the battlefield, Yusaku continued, his tone steady. I heard it was because some big figure in the village captured a ninja from Konoha. They planned to implant a tailed beast inside that Konoha ninja and send her back, turning her into a walking bomb. But that Jinchuriki was intercepted, and her husband was one of the people sent to chase them down. May's eyes flickered. She turned to look at him more closely. You remember quite a lot. She had heard of that operation, and the one who intercepted that Konoha ninja was said to be none other than Kakashi Hatake. Yusaku didn't look at her. Of course I remember. I knew him since I was a child. He taught me a lot. We were close. He paused briefly, then continued. After the war ended, their eldest son grew up and entered the ninja academy. At least, thanks to Zabuza, he didn't have to kill a classmate just to graduate. But after graduating, that noisy kid died too. On a mission. Yusaku's grip tightened slightly on the bottle. I
looked into it afterward. That mission wasn't something a genin could complete. Even a chūnin would have had a high chance of dying. It was the kind of mission only a jonin could safely handle. May's expression darkened. You're saying someone deliberately raised the difficulty? Sent a genin to do a jonin-level mission? In Kirigakure, mission assignments were supposed to be strictly regulated. Each rank handled tasks appropriate to their level. What Yusaku described was a serious violation. But then a realization struck her. In the entire village, who would treat their own ninjas like expendable enemies? Only one answer came to mind. Yagura Karatachi. Cruel, paranoid, ruthless. He purged dissenters and dragged others down with them. The infamous bloody mist policies had flourished under his rule. And because of that, the entire village now lived in fear. Even trained ninjas felt unsafe, constantly worried they might be killed by their own comrades for no reason at all. The whole place felt like a ghost town, even in broad daylight. Yusaku let out a quiet sigh, a trace of exhaustion in his voice. After losing her husband and eldest son, she kept a low profile, raising her younger child alone. She didn't even let him become a ninja. With the compensation from her family's deaths, they managed to get by. He paused. But a few years ago, the Mizukage decided to cut expenses and started making reductions across the village. He glanced at May. You've heard about that, right? May nodded, then her expression shifted. You mean the village cut off their compensation too? She shook her head immediately, her tone firm. That's impossible. I've never heard of any policy like that regarding death compensation. Even if the Mizukage dared to try something like that, Lord Genji would never allow it. And the Mizukage isn't a fool. He knows that would provoke public outrage. He wouldn't do something like that. He wouldn't do it openly, of course.
Yusaka let out a faint, mocking laugh. But there are plenty of ways to get around it in the shadows. For example, redefining what death in battle actually means. He spoke calmly, but each word landed heavily. Unless someone personally witnesses the ninja's death, and unless the body is recovered intact, it doesn't count. And if it doesn't count, the family gets nothing. May's eyes widened. She stopped in her tracks, staring straight at him.
Are you serious? If you look into it yourself, you'll find out soon enough. Yusaku turned his head slightly and gestured forward, signaling her to keep walking. When she caught up, he continued. Take the Sawamura family, for example. When her husband died, his entire unit was wiped out. No witnesses, so it doesn't count. As for her eldest son, his body was never recovered, so that doesn't count either. No recognition, no compensation. They're surviving now only on what little savings her husband left behind, and whatever help neighbors like us can offer. He took another sip, then let out a quiet breath. Funny, isn't it? A man dies for the village on the battlefield. His son dies on a mission. And yet the family left behind gets squeezed dry by the very village they sacrificed everything for. Some days they don't even have enough to eat. May's lips tightened. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice subdued. You're right. I really don't understand what's happening at the bottom. Then something clicked. That woman earlier, the way she looked at me, was it because... Yusaku thought for a moment before answering in a low voice. She probably thought you were from the Anbu. That you came to take my life. That kind of thing happens a lot here. You see it from time to time. He gave a dry chuckle. There's even a joke about it. The worst thing in life is when a squad of Anbu barges into your house and says, "So-and-so, your time is up." And the happiest thing is when you reply, "That guy lives next door. You've got the wrong house." But May didn't laugh, not even a little. Instead, her expression grew heavier. An oppressive silence settled between them. After walking a while longer, May suddenly stopped. She looked up at the large estate before them. We're here. This is Lord Genji's residence. Yusaku stood beside her, gazing at the imposing gates. The estate was vast, its walls stretching far along the road. A traditional courtyard design, yet still bearing the unmistakable style of Kirigakure. At the entrance, May glanced at him, trying to shake off the suffocating mood lingering in her chest. Her eyes fell on his sunglasses. I was already wondering back at your place. It's the middle of the night. Why are you still wearing sunglasses? At home is one thing, but out here, in the dark, aren't you worried you won't see where you're going? Yusaku suddenly laughed. He lifted his head and stepped forward toward the gate. His voice, filled with unmistakable confidence, echoed faintly through the quiet street. I told you already. I can see more clearly now than ever before. He paused for a fraction of a second, then added, and I can also see that this fog is about to lift. His back was reflected in May's eyes, as if carrying a faint glimmer of light. Without turning around, he raised a hand and gestured ahead. Let's go. Take me to Genji. Chapter 8. Genji. The night had grown deep, and the courtyard lay in utter silence. The old man, advanced in years, had long since lost the need for much sleep. Even now, he remained awake. A small lamp flickered beside a low table. Seated on the tatami, the elderly figure leaned forward, trembling slightly as he held a book close to the light, slowly turning its pages. Then a shadow appeared outside. A figure knelt on one knee, its silhouette cast clearly against the paper door. Lord Genji! The old man's frail, almost fading voice sounded from within. Gonbi is it? What is it? The man outside spoke respectfully. My lord, May Teruli has returned. She has brought someone with her, saying there is an urgent matter that must be reported to you in person. Oh. Genji lowered the book, his wrinkled face showing a trace of thought. And who has she brought? A subordinate of Department Head Hisashi, a chūnin named Matsuda Yusaku. At that, Genji's expression shifted.
first to one of expectation, then to mild curiosity. Earlier, Hisashi from the administrative department had come to see him, mentioning this same chūnin. During their conversation, Genji had deliberately allowed Mei to overhear. Afterward, he had sent her to find this Yusaku. And now, she had returned, bringing him along? Had something happened in such a short time that caused Mei to change her original plan? After a moment's thought, the old man nodded. Let them in. The figure outside vanished in a blur. Before long, footsteps echoed along the wooden corridor outside. Voices followed. Ara, this place is huge. Can Lord Genji really live here all by himself? That is Lord Genji's residence. Watch your tone, show some respect. Mei's voice carried a sharp edge of reprimand. Then came a man's unfamiliar voice, casual, almost lazy. Yeah, got it. By the way, we just walked straight out of my house and came here like this. Is that really fine? No surveillance from the Mizukage or anything? What are you even saying? You're just a chūnin. Ouch. That actually hurts a little. The sound of their conversation grew louder as they approached, until their silhouettes were cast clearly against the paper door under the corridor lights. Outside, Ganbi's voice rang out. Lord Genji, Jonin Mei Terumi, and chūnin Matsuda Yusaku have arrived. Come in. The old man's slow, slightly trembling voice drifted from within. Ganbi slid the paper door open and stepped inside first, with Mei and Yusaku following behind. The room was dim, lit only by a single oil lamp. As Yusaku entered, he saw an elderly man seated beside a low table. The man's body was frail and hunched, clad in a dull yellow kimono. His head was completely bald, smooth and shining without a single strand of hair. Not just his scalp, his face too was devoid of any hair. No eyebrows, no beard. He looked almost like some strange ancient spirit. At a glance, Yusaku couldn't help but wonder if the old man might collapse at any moment. And yet, this was the elder of Kirigakure, a figure whose authority rivaled that of the Mizukage himself. Genji. If not for Mei's presence, there was no way someone like Yusaku, a mere chūnin, could have gained an audience with him so easily. Seeing them, the old man slowly raised a trembling, withered hand and gestured toward the tatami in front of him. Mei and Matsuda, was it? Sit, both of you. Then he turned his narrow, almost invisible gaze toward Ganbi. Ganbi, tea. Yes, Ganbi moved to the side, rummaging through a cabinet to prepare tea. Mei knelt down, her posture relaxed, almost casual. Looking at Genji, a playful smile appeared on her face. Still awake at this hour, Lord Genji? Be careful. At your age, staying up late isn't exactly healthy. Mei, I am still a ninja, after all. Genji shook his head slowly, his tone unbothered. Though I am old, I can endure a little hardship. It was clear from their exchange the two were quite familiar with each other. There was an ease, almost a lightness, in the way they spoke. Genji slowly turned his head, his narrow gaze settling on Yusaku. A hint of recollection appeared on his face. I remember you, Matsuda Yusaku. Your reports are well written, quite capable. Hisashi often praises you in front of me. Yusaku sat cross-legged beside Mei, observing the elder carefully through his sunglasses. He had seen Genji before, but always from a distance. This was the first time they were face to face. At first glance, only 4 people seemed present in the room. But as Yusaku focused his senses, he detected multiple hidden presences, both inside and outside. Bodyguards. Their auras were restrained, yet intentionally leaked just enough to be noticed. A warning, Yusaku thought. A reminder not to try anything foolish. Fitting. Guards didn't just protect, they deterred. After studying him for a while, Genji's gaze drifted to Yusaku's sunglasses. It's quite dark at night, and yet you still wear those. Aren't you afraid of tripping? Because it looks cool, Yusaku answered without hesitation. Genji gave him a slow once-over, then nodded approvingly. Indeed, a rather handsome young man. Lord Genji, please remember your position, Mei said, exasperated.
Yusaku, however, smiled and puffed out his chest slightly. As expected of the village elder, truly a man of insight. At that moment, a system notification suddenly rang in his mind. Alert! Host has encountered one of the 5 elders of the world government, Saint Ethan Baron V. Nusjoro. Alert! Host has encountered Marine Officer Mamunga Quest. Issued. Challenge the 5 elders. Yusaku glanced at it and immediately shut the interface down. Not now. And what was this nonsense? 5 elders? Mamunga? He cast a brief look at Gonbi, who was busy preparing tea, then at Genji in front of him. Unbelievable! So the system didn't just misidentify him and Mei, it misidentified everyone. How blind could it possibly be? Just because Genji was bald, it labeled him as one of the 5 elders? And Gonbi, just because he looked a bit rough, it tagged him as some marine officer? Yusaku shook his head inwardly. At this point, he was completely convinced his system was hopeless, and clearly it would keep making even more ridiculous mistakes in the future. Noticing Yusaku's gaze, Genji lifted his head slightly, puzzled. Yusaku snapped back to himself, then spoke. I heard from Mei that Department Head Hizashi came to you regarding my situation. That's correct, Genji nodded frankly. Hizashi values you highly. He hoped I would speak to the Mizukage and cancel your recent assignment. But the village is unstable of late, and the Mizukage has just survived an assassination attempt. In times like these, even someone like me carries little weight. Yusaku let out a soft breath. I didn't expect him to go that far for me. Looks like I owe him one. Before the conversation could continue, Mei suddenly spoke. Lord Genji, there's something I need to say. Without waiting, she continued firmly. The chūnin beside me, Matsuda Yusaku, must be protected, even if it means angering the Mizukage. Chapter 9. Yusaku's Intelligence. After hearing Mei's words, Genji showed no surprise. His expression remained as lifeless as ever. When I heard you brought him here, I already expected you to think this way. Mei, you are the most outstanding among the younger generation of this village. I trust your judgment, but still, let me hear your reasoning. Mei didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to Yusaku. The abilities you showed me earlier, may I explain them to Lord Genji? Of course, Yusaku agreed without hesitation. After all, that had been his intention from the start. With his consent, Mei spoke. Lord Genji, Yusaku possesses an exceptional Kekkei Genkai. It is none other than the ice release of the Yuki clan. Oh? For the first time, Genji's gaze sharpened slightly as it settled on Yusaku. Even Gonbi, who was pouring tea nearby, paused mid-motion, surprise flickering across his face. But he quickly recovered, placing a cup in front of Yusaku. Please. Yusaku nodded politely in thanks. The ice fruit was difficult to explain outright, but it could easily pass as ice release. After all, Kirigakure's Yuki clan was famed for exactly that ability. Holding the still warm teacup, Yusaku extended it slightly toward Genji. Then he gently blew on it. A chill spread through the room out of nowhere. In an instant, the steaming tea froze solid into a block of ice. Even the tea leaves were sealed within its surface. A thin layer of frost formed over the outer wall of the cup. Gonbi's eyes widened. Ice release! It really is ice release! Lower your voice, Gonbi. I can hear just fine. Genji's narrow eyes opened just a fraction wider. Then his expression shifted. As if realizing something, he looked sharply at Yusaku. At the same time, Gonbi seemed to catch on as well. Wait! You didn't form any hand seals just now, did you? He had seen it clearly. There had been no hand seals at all. Yusaku simply smiled and nodded. Mei spoke up at once. Lord Genji, this is the second point I wish to make. Yusaku has developed a sealless technique, allowing him to instantly use ice release. Just like the 4th Hokage of the Land of Fire, Minato Namikaze. The value of such an ability needs no further explanation. Gonbi was momentarily speechless. This is incredible. When he looked at Yusaku again, his attitude had completely changed. The subtle superiority he carried earlier had vanished.
In its place was unmistakable respect. After all, as May had said, the last person known to develop a sealess technique was none other than the yellow flash of Konoha, Minato Namikaze. A thought flashed through Ganbi's mind. After everything Kirigakure has suffered, could be that today, at last, a ninja as brilliant as the yellow flash has appeared in our village? The room fell silent for several seconds. Then, resolve hardened on Genji's aged face. May, you did the right thing. Absolutely right. Kirigakure has already lost too many outstanding ninjas. We cannot afford to lose another. He turned to Yusaku, whose calm smile hadn't changed.
The old man's voice was still frail, as though it might give out at any moment, yet the conviction within it was unmistakable. Yusaku, I have made my decision. Even if it angers the Mizukage, even if it costs me my life, I will protect you. Before Yusaku could respond, the old man suddenly straightened and bowed deeply to him. Yusaku, it was my failure before. If you harbor resentment, you may vent it at me. If it will ease your grievances, then even if I must pay with my life afterward, I will accept it willingly. Just do not come to hate the village. The village is only in a difficult period right now, and the Mizukage, His voice faltered. The long speech had drained him of strength, leaving his final words unfinished. Faced with such sincerity and such a lowered posture, Yusaku hesitated for a brief moment. Then he reached out and helped the old man up. There's no need to dwell on the past, he said calmly. This village is where I grew up. How could I resent it? Hearing this, Genji let out a long breath of relief. That's good, that's good. He nodded repeatedly, murmuring under his breath. Yusaku, however, wasn't surprised by the sudden shift in attitude, nor did he feel anything about it. A person's value was determined by their ability, and that value dictated how others treated them. Before, he had been nothing more than an ordinary chūnin, one among countless others. If he had died unjustly under the Mizukage's schemes, the most anyone would say was, the Mizukage's at it again. Then they'd shiver and pray they weren't next. But now he had revealed the power of the ice fruit. Mistaken for ice release and a sealless technique, his value had risen beyond comparison. A potential force capable of shaping the battlefield was not the same as a disposable pawn marked for death. The two would never be treated equally. Whether one called it the decline of morals or simply human nature, this was the reality of the world. In the ninja world, and in the world he came from before, it was always the same. Yusaku had accepted that long ago. He looked at Genji, eyes narrowing slightly behind his sunglasses. Lord Genji, you mentioned earlier that the village is in a difficult situation. I just happen to have some intelligence. Something that might solve your current predicament. Genji, who had just relaxed, showed a flicker of surprise. Before he could speak, Mei added, Lord Genji, I didn't bring Yusaku here just to save him. He said he had something important to report, so important that he couldn't even tell me. It must be delivered to you personally. And it concerns the Mizukage. Oh, Genji's interest was immediately piqued. He turned his gaze back to Yusaku. It concerns the Mizukage? Absolutely. Seeing the seriousness in Yusaku's expression, Genji leaned forward slightly. What is this intelligence? Yusaku didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes flicked briefly toward the others in the room, Mei and Ganbi. Genji noticed and waved a hand. No matter, speak freely. Both Mei and Ganbi are trustworthy. With that assurance, Yusaku nodded. He took a slow breath, then spoke clearly. Our fourth Mizukage, Yagura Karatachi, the perfect Jinchuriki of the three tails. Since the end of the war, since he ascended to power, has been under genjutsu control the entire time. That's why he issued those cruel, inhumane policies. That's why he's done so many things that defy all reason. What? Chapter 10. The Truth of the Mizukage. The dimly lit room fell into an unprecedented silence. After Yusaku's words,
Everyone, Genji, Mei Terumi, and Gonbi, seemed frozen in place. Their expressions stiffened, their bodies went rigid, no one moved. They stared at Yusaku, whose calm demeanor only made their shock more pronounced. Their pupils trembled violently. The silence grew so heavy that Yusaku could hear their breathing, growing rougher, more uneven. Even the hidden guards outside, in his perception, their auras flickered for a moment. They had been shaken, and understandably so. The Mizukage, the strongest figure in Kirigakure, one of the leaders standing at the peak of the 5 great nations, had supposedly been under genjutsu control for years? If Yusaku himself had grown up in this world, he might have been just as stunned hearing it, let alone these people who had lived under the Mizukage's oppressive rule for so long. Authority had been carved into their bones. To hear something like this now, of course it would shake them. Time passed, whether a second or an eternity, no one could tell. Then, no! Impossible! Absolutely impossible! Gonbi suddenly shot to his feet, his face twisted with disbelief as he roared. That's the Mizukage we're talking about, the strongest in the village! How could he possibly be controlled by genjutsu? His eyes were bloodshot, his voice trembling with emotion. Yusaku, you're just trying to escape a death mission, saying anything you can. The Mizukage is incredibly powerful, and more than that, he's the Three Tails' perfect Jinchuriki. If someone tried to control him, the Three Tails inside him would break the illusion. Your story doesn't make sense at all. His fists clenched tightly, his body shaking as he demanded an explanation. Even Mei couldn't remain unaffected. Looking at Yusaku, doubt was clear in her eyes. For the first time, she wondered, is he lying just to survive? Genji, on the other hand, remained silent, his expression dark, unreadable. After a moment, he turned his head slightly and spoke. Gonbi, calm yourself. Sit down. But Lord Genji! Sit. The old man's voice was slow but firm. Gonbi hesitated, then reluctantly forced himself to sit back down. But Lord Genji! Sit. The old man's voice was slow but firm. Gonbi hesitated, then reluctantly forced himself to sit back down. Yet his gaze remained locked onto Yusaku, his face still flushed with anger. Genji could understand his reaction. If what Yusaku said was true, then everything would collapse. All the bloody policies, all the purges, all the suffering. If the Mizukage had truly been manipulated, then what did that make them, the ones who carried out his orders? A joke? And those who had died or defected because of those policies, what were they? The near-annihilated Yuki clan, the Kaguya clan now on the brink of rebellion, the oppressed Hozuki clan, and those who fled in defiance, like Zabuza Momochi, Raiga Kurasuki, Juzo Biwa? What would their actions mean now? If this were true, Kirigakure's authority, its reputation, even the very prestige of the Mizukage title would be shattered. The entire village would be thrown into an unprecedented political crisis. And if word spread to the outside world, how would the other great nations see them? All these thoughts flashed through Genji's mind in an instant. Then he looked at Yusaku. He didn't speak, but his intent was clear. He wanted proof, decisive proof. Yusaku wasn't surprised by their reactions. Everything was within his expectations. He scratched his head slightly, then spoke under their intense gazes. Gonbi, I understand your doubts. After all, he's the Mizukage, a perfect Jinchuriki. Under normal circumstances, genjutsu shouldn't work on him. He paused. Then his tone shifted slightly. But what if? The one controlling him isn't ordinary. What if that person didn't just control the Mizukage, but also controlled the Three Tails inside him as well? Hearing that, Gonbi's expression tightened. He instinctively wanted to argue, but the words caught in his throat. There was too much to say, yet he didn't even know where to begin. Mei glanced at Genji, then voiced the doubt everyone was thinking. Yusaku, what exactly do you mean? In the ninja world, who could possibly use genjutsu to control a tailed beast? The Uchiha clan? But the Uchiha were wiped out not long ago. They couldn't have done this. And even if you mean that survivor, the one who slaughtered his own clan, Itachi Uchiha, how old is he? How could someone that young possess genjutsu powerful enough to control the Mizukage? She paused, then shook her head, correcting herself. No, that's not entirely right. If he wiped out his entire clan, his strength is undeniable. But the timeline still doesn't match.
The Mizukage has been ruling for years. Back then, Itachi was what, 7 or 8 years old? If you're saying a child like that could control the Mizukage and the Three Tails, she let out a faint, almost self-mocking laugh. Then it would be more believable to say that Madara Uchiha is still alive. Ganbi nodded repeatedly beside her. She had perfectly voiced what he wanted to say. Yusaku, however, looked strangely amused. Are you serious? Did you just accidentally hit the truth? For a moment, he almost wondered if Mei had some kind of future vision, or if she had somehow read the original story. Seeing his expression, Mei frowned. What kind of look is that? Did I say something wrong? No, Yusaku replied without hesitation, not wrong at all. Then what? Before she could finish, he continued calmly. Jonin Mei, what you said is completely correct. The odd tone in his voice made her freeze. Then her expression changed. Lowering her voice, she asked, You mean, looks like you figured it out. Yusaku nodded again, his tone steady. Just as you said, Madara Uchiha is still alive. And he's the one who has been secretly controlling our perfect Jinchuriki Mizukage. In truth, explaining Obito Uchiha would take far too much effort. And Obito had been operating under Madara's name anyway, so putting the blame on Madara wasn't entirely inaccurate. After all, everything had started with him. What nonsense are you talking about? Ganbi burst out immediately. Madara Uchiha was killed by the first Hokage at the Valley of the End. There's no way he's still alive. And even if he somehow survived, he'd be ancient by now. How could he still have the power to do something like this? Mei followed up sharply. This is too far-fetched. Your claims just keep getting more and more unbelievable. Between the two of them, Yusaku's words were quickly dismissed. It wasn't that they didn't want to believe, it was just too absurd. Everything he said overturned their understanding of the world. Yusaku simply shrugged, completely unfazed. Believe it or don't, I'm just telling you what I know. His gaze shifted to Genji. The old man remained as steady as a mountain. No visible reaction, no interruption. As expected, among everyone present, Genji was the one who truly mattered, the one who would decide everything. Yusaku spoke again, calmly. There's someone in the village who can verify my words. You have a Biogon user, don't you? Let him take a look, and you'll know whether I'm telling the truth. Chapter 11, Who Would Strike an Old Man? Our Mizukage, what was he like before taking office, and what has he become since? You Jonin at the center of power should know better than I do. Have you really never wondered why Yagura Kuratachi changed so drastically after becoming Mizukage? His policies are even harsher than those of the third Mizukage. The tragic fate of the Yuki clan, the suffering of the village's shinobi. Calling it political persecution almost feels like an understatement. It's obvious he's deliberately harming the people of this village. You're all elites. Can you really not see that? Yusaku's calm voice rang out, each sentence striking like a hammer. Visibly, doubt began to surface on the faces of Mei Terumi and Ganbi. Just as he said, ever since Yagura took power, his rule had been indescribable. There wasn't a single person in the village who didn't harbor resentment. Figures like Zabuza Momochi and Raiga Kurosuke hadn't acted out of nowhere. They were driven to rebellion by his tyranny. Assassinations, defections, resistance, all of it stemmed from the same source. If not for Yagura's overwhelming strength suppressing the entire village, his rule would have been overthrown long ago. Mei turned to Ganbi, hesitation in her expression. Senior Ganbi, what kind of person was the Mizukage before he took office?
Yagura's youthful appearance belied his true age. Even during the Third Shinobi War, he had already been a renowned ninja. But Mei belonged to a younger generation, and with Kirigakure's strict secrecy, she had little knowledge of his past. Only after becoming a jonin did she begin to learn more. Like most in the village, her impression of the fourth Mizukage could be summed up in 2 words: barely human. Rule through fear, maintain control through oppression. Not only did he intensify the bloody mist policies, he pushed them to terrifying new extremes. Under Mei's gaze, Ganbi's expression turned grim as memories surfaced. Before becoming Mizukage, he was a hero of the village. Gentle, considerate toward his subordinates. A flawless ninja. But after taking the position, he changed. Step by step, he became cold, cruel, bloodthirsty. We always thought maybe he had just been hiding his true nature before. Or perhaps he became obsessed with power and began purging anyone who threatened his position. At this point, he glanced at Yusaku, his eyes lowering. "If what you're saying is true, then we—" His voice trailed off. Genji let out a tired sigh. "When we chose him back then, it was precisely because of his kindness and excellence. We hoped he could change the bloody mist policies left behind by the third Mizukage. But who would have thought he would surpass even the third in brutality?" The bloody mist system hadn't begun with Yagura. It had been established during the era of the third Mizukage, masked under the name of elitism, though the outside world already called it the Village of Blood Mist. Yagura, however, had taken that legacy and pushed it to its absolute extreme. After hearing both of them, the doubt on Mei's face deepened. She glanced at Yusaku again, her thoughts churning. Could he actually be telling the truth? Was the Mizukage really being controlled? The drastic contrast before and after Yagura's rise was too suspicious to ignore. Yusaku, meanwhile, gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. He understood this all too well. He had even lived through part of it himself. When he first became a ninja, the third Mizukage was still in power. Back then, one of the bloody mist policies required academy students to kill their classmates in order to graduate. Only the survivor could become a true ninja. It wasn't until Zabuza Momochi slaughtered his entire class in one go that the village was finally forced to abolish that absurd rule. Honestly, Kirigakure's last 2 Mizukage hadn't exactly been human. If anything, the second Mizukage, with his ridiculous little mustache, was more tolerable. Well, strictly speaking, the fourth Mizukage was also a victim. He had been under genjutsu control by Obito Uchiha all along. In the end, the blood debt of Kirigakure belonged to Obito. Yusaku sighed inwardly. What is this if not disaster falling from the sky? At that moment, Genji coughed lightly. All right. Cough. His gaze swept across the room. Genji's narrow gaze swept across the 3 of them before settling on Yusaku. Chūnin Yusaku, the intelligence you've provided is highly valuable. I will handle the rest. With that, the old man solemnly bowed to him. Though what Yusaku said sounded outrageous, it wasn't impossible. Straightening up, Genji called out toward the outside. A figure appeared instantly at the doorway and dropped to one knee. Lord Genji, your orders. Bo, you heard everything just now, Genji said in his frail voice. Good. This is urgent. Go and bring Alo here. Tell him I wish to see him. After a brief pause, he added, and do not inform him of our conversation yet. Understood. The ninja accepted the order and vanished in an instant. Yusaku glanced at him. The aura was familiar, one of the hidden guards from earlier. The fact that Genji still trusted him enough to send him out meant he was a confidant, and judging by that swift body flicker technique, his strength was at least chūnin level. Genji seemed to notice Yusaku's gaze. No need to worry, Bo is my guard. Like Ganbi and the others here, he is one of my trusted men. They are all reliable. The Mizukage has no reach here. Yusaku nodded slightly. As long as you're confident, that's enough. After a moment of thought, Genji spoke again. Yusaku, There is something I must ask.
The Mizukage's information is highly classified. As for him being under genjutsu, even we never noticed. How did you come to know this? At those words, both Mei Terumi and Gonbi turned to look at Yusaku. Their faces mirrored Genji's curiosity. They had thought of this too, but Yusaku's earlier revelation had been so shocking that they hadn't asked. A mere chūnin, and an administrative clerk at that. There was no way he should have access to the Mizukage. If not observation, then it had to be an unknown source of intelligence. Yusaku's gaze swept across the three of them. He smiled faintly. Do I have to say? Gonbi frowned. If you don't reveal your source, how can we trust your words? Yusaku replied calmly. Don't you have the Byogon? You don't need to trust me. Trust that instead.
Well, that's true, but... Before Gonbi could continue, Genji cut him off. That's enough, Gonbi. No need to press further. He looked at Yusaku, his tone carrying approval. If you don't wish to say, then don't. I won't force you. You are a ninja of this village. I believe you won't harm it. Yusaku raised a brow slightly. Not bad, old man. Pretty open-minded. I like that. Mei glanced at him, thoughtful. At that moment, a glint flashed in Yusaku's eyes as he looked straight at Genji. Old man, I've provided such important intelligence. Aren't you going to reward me? Before Genji could respond, Gonbi snapped. Matsuda Yusaku, that's enough. Your information hasn't even been verified yet, and you're already asking for a reward? That's too much. Genji patted his shoulder, calming him down with a few words. Then he turned back to Yusaku. Chūnin Yusaku, whether your information proves true or not, it is still a great contribution. Tell me, what do you want? If it is within my power, I will grant it. Really? Yusaku asked, tone curious. Genji nodded firmly. Of course. A genuine smile appeared on Yusaku's face. He raised a finger and pointed straight at the old man. Genji, you've been an elder since the village's founding. You've served through 4 Mizukage and remained in power all this time. I assume your strength must be considerable. I want to fight you. I want to see what you're capable of. What? Chapter 12, Turning a Mistake into Opportunity. Matsuda Yusaku, you! The moment Yusaku made his request, Gonbi's temper flared. He shot up from the tatami, glaring fiercely at that infuriating smile. Just moments ago, he had thought Yusaku was a newly discovered talent, someone worth protecting. Now, that same face looked downright punchable. Such audacity! To offend Lord Genji like this! You have no respect, no discipline. Do you even understand his status? You think you can challenge him just because you feel like it? Perform seppuku and atone. Yusaku shrugged, tone laced with amusement. I'm a ninja, not a samurai. Where would I even get the idea of seppuku? Beside him, Mei Terumi tugged at the corner of his coat, her brows tightly knit. Yusaku, your demand is too much. Even with your contribution, you shouldn't be so disrespectful to Lord Genji. I'm telling you this as a former classmate. Drop it now. Don't push things to the point where no one can save face. She pulled harder. But Yusaku didn't budge. Clearly, he wasn't listening. Mei felt a surge of irritation, a faint flush rising to her cheeks. Fine. If you insist on being this stubborn, then I'm done trying to help you. Suit yourself. Some people just can't be reasoned with. Mei, Gonbi, there's no need to get so worked up. Calm yourselves. Genji raised a hand, speaking in his usual slow, measured tone. Then he looked at Yusaku, at that unshaken confidence. Something stirred in his mind. I see. So that's the type he is. Young, full of spirit, brash, headstrong, thinking that newfound strength means he can ignore the rules of the world. Matsuda Yusaku. After years of obscurity, he suddenly awakens, and now he's burning bright. Watching the boldness on Yusaku's face, Genji seemed to understand. So, there's resentment. He must still harbor dissatisfaction from when he had been abandoned earlier. And now he was using this moment to vent it. That's fine, that's fine. Better to let it out than keep it bottled up. If such resentment continued to build, one day it might erupt and endanger the entire village. Better to release it now than face the consequences later. After a brief silence, Genji spoke slowly. "Yusaku, may I call you that?" "You're an elder, of course," Yusaku replied. Genji nodded. "Yusaku, I understand what you're feeling. Back then, choosing to abandon you was my mistake. I wronged you. If you harbor resentment toward me, that's only natural. No, you don't understand. Not at all." Yusaku shifted his gaze slightly, a trace of guilt flashing across his face. He knew exactly what the old man was thinking, but the truth couldn't be further from it. The real reason he made that request was the system. Right after finishing his explanation, he had checked the interface. Quest: challenge the 5 elders, defeat St. Ethan Baron V, Newsjuro. Conqueror's Hockey? For a side quest, the reward was absurdly generous. Yusaku knew he wasn't some once-in-a-million genius. If he wanted Conqueror's Hockey, the only way was through the system. Sure, the system was blind and borderline ridiculous, but when it came to rewards, it delivered. And since it had already misidentified people, why not just go along with it? If he could get that power, like Luffy, one glance, one surge of will, and an entire crowd would collapse unconscious. Just thinking about it made his blood stir. As for Genji's strength, Yusaku had been in the village for years. He knew enough. Genji's status came from authority and experience, not combat. And now, he was old, frail, barely able to walk without a cane. Even if he had once been strong, how much remained? If Yusaku could defeat him, he'd gain Conqueror's Hockey. Simple. But then, Yusaku hesitated. The old man looked too fragile. What if he accidentally knocked him over? What if he died? Elderly people were like that. One fall could be the end. And this one looked like he might collapse at any moment. That made things tricky. If Genji died here, with his influence, Yusaku might as well defect from the village on the spot. Still, the reward was right there. Yusaku clenched his jaw. This chance wouldn't come twice. He couldn't let it slip. Fine, he'd do it. As long as he controlled his strength, carefully, precisely, like serving something delicate, easing the old man down without impact. It should be fine. Probably. Genji watched him quietly. The hesitation, the resolve. In his eyes, it told a different story. Ah, I see. Youthful pride. He knows it's improper, yet insists anyway. From the moment Yusaku revealed ice release and a sealless technique, Genji had already taken a liking to him. Now, observing him more closely, that impression only deepened. A talented young man. As for why he had hidden his ability all this time, Genji didn't need to think hard. The fate of the Yuki clan spoke for itself. Anyone with ice release would hide it to survive. That showed restraint. He had fought in the Third Shinobi War. He cared for the village. He brought intelligence the moment he received a death mission. He understood the bigger picture. He hesitated to fight an old man. He had kindness. And yet he still insisted he had resolve. The more Genji thought about it, the more satisfied he became. A rare seed, a talent worth cultivating. "Very well," Genji said with a faint smile. "Since you insist and Gonbi objects so strongly, why don't the two of you fight first? If you can defeat Gonbi, then I will personally face you." Gonbi's eyes lit up. "Rest assured, Lord Genji, I won't let this brat get his way. As your guard, protecting you is my duty." Mei frowned deeply. "Lord Genji, are you serious? If he wins, you'll really fight him? At your age, if anything happens, what about the village? The Mizukage issue isn't even resolved." Gonbi snorted. "What, Mei? You don't think I can handle him? I'm a Jonin. Even if I'm not as strong as you, dealing with a mere Chunin is effortless." He looked at Yusaku with a cold smile. "A brat like you, ice release or not, sealless jutsu or not, you're no match for me. I'll show you the difference between us." Yusaku remained calm. With a thought, he opened the system again. Quest: defeat Momanga Rokushiki, Iron Body. His brow lifted slightly. Iron body, a classic marine technique, solid defense. Not the most glamorous, but still useful. Yusaku smiled faintly and stood up, meeting Gonbi's gaze without backing down. So, Gonbi is Momonga, huh? All right, Senior Gonbi, show me what you've got. A reward was a reward, and this one he was definitely taking. 13 to 18. Chapter 13. Teaching Mei. Lord Genji, forgive my presumption. I request permission to use the training grounds in your residence. Faced with Gonbi's request, Genji didn't hesitate at all. Very well. With approval granted, Gonbi shot Yusaku a provocative look. Kid, follow me. Wait. Gonbi smirked. What, already realized you can't win? Planning to surrender? That works too. Saves me the trouble of beating you up for nothing. Yusaku shook his head. Not that. I've got something else. He turned to Genji, his tone relaxed and casual. When me and I came in earlier, the guards at the door took a bottle of liquor. Mind returning it? I'm a bit thirsty. Genji glanced at Mei. No wonder I caught the scent of alcohol earlier. You too, Mei. We did have a drink before coming, Mei admitted, a hint of embarrassment on her face. Genji called out toward the ceiling. A ninja appeared instantly, received the order, and disappeared again. Gonbi let out a cold laugh. Planning to drink for courage? It won't help. The gap between us is obvious at a glance. Yusaku only shrugged, saying nothing. Seeing his nonchalant attitude, Gonbi clicked his tongue and walked out first. Follow me. The training grounds are underground. Yusaku followed. Behind them, Genji moved slowly with Mei's support. Along the way, Mei couldn't help but continue persuading him. Lord Genji, are you really going to let them fight? The village is already full of problems, and the Mizukage situation still needs confirmation. How can we waste time on something like this? Genji remained calm. Ao hasn't arrived yet, has he? By the time he gets here, the fight should already be over. But Mei tried to continue, but Genji cut her off gently. Mei, don't worry. Gonbi knows his limits. He's just testing Yusaku. It's a spar, not a life-or-death battle. No need to be so tense. He paused, then looked at her with trust in his voice. Besides, you're here too. If things get out of hand, you can step in. Don't tell me you can't stop the two of them. Mei glanced at the figures ahead, confidence returning. Of course I can. Because she was supporting Genji, they moved slower. Before long, Yusaku and Gonbi had already gone ahead. Once the two disappeared from sight, Mei suddenly lowered her voice. Lord Genji, about Yusaku's source of information, I think I have a lead. Genji showed no surprise. I know what you're thinking. You believe it's connected to Zabuza Momochi. Exactly, Mei nodded. According to Yusaku's records, he was close to Zabuza. They may still be in contact. Zabuza just attempted to assassinate the Mizukage. It's possible he discovered something and told Yusaku. Genji recalled the earlier visit from the administrative head, his expression thoughtful. Because of his connection to Zabuza, Yusaku was assigned that high-risk mission by the Mizukage. A mission meant to eliminate him. His steps paused for a brief moment, then resumed. Mei noticed. Lord Genji, did you think of something? Genji's voice turned low. Mei, do you think our Mizukage is aware that Zabuza has seen through him? Mei froze. Then her expression changed drastically. You mean the one controlling the Mizukage knew this, and that's why Yusaku was sent to die? After thinking it through, she shook her head. That doesn't seem right. Based on his usual behavior, he would have just sent Anbu to eliminate him directly. No need for something this complicated. Genji spoke calmly. Mei, Yusaku's information hasn't been confirmed yet. Don't jump to conclusions. Then he added quietly, but have you considered that this might be intentional? His narrowed eyes opened slightly, a sharp glint replacing their usual cloudiness. He could be using Yusaku as bait to draw me out. My position and influence in the village are inconvenient for him. Why not take the opportunity to remove me as well? His tone turned heavier. Genji, dissatisfied with the Mizukage, spreads rumors that the Mizukage is under genjutsu and attempts a coup, only to be suppressed by the Mizukage, who then consolidates power completely. Listen to it. Doesn't it sound perfectly reasonable? Mei's face turned pale. Her lips trembled as she forced herself to stay composed. "Lord Genji, you—" She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. Genji shook his head slightly and sighed inwardly. "Mei, remember this. You are destined to become Mizukage one day. You must always remain calm." Hearing that, Mei snapped back to her senses, letting out a quiet breath. When she looked at him again, his expression had already returned to normal, as if that earlier intensity had never existed. "Lord Genji, were you testing me just now?" Indeed. Only then did Mei fully relax. "No wonder you allowed them to fight. You had already seen through everything." Genji turned his head and spoke gently, almost like a teacher. "You must remember, when you become Mizukage, you can no longer view the world as a mere ninja. That perspective is too narrow. It blinds you. You must understand both individuals and the bigger picture. See not only what's on the surface, but also what lies beneath. Examine things from multiple angles, and never overlook small details. Only then can you truly see the truth and avoid being deceived." Mei listened intently, committing every word to memory. After a moment, she asked, "Then, Lord Genji, how are you certain that the one controlling the Mizukage, or the Mizukage himself, wouldn't act that way?" Genji suddenly stopped walking and frowned slightly, looking at her. Mei had no choice but to stop as well. Seeing Genji's faint look of dissatisfaction, Mei felt a jolt of panic and was just about to explain herself when he let out a soft sigh. "Mei, it seems none of what I just said truly stayed with you." "What do you mean? I wouldn't dare forget your teachings," she replied with an awkward smile, though she clearly didn't understand what she had done wrong. Genji tapped his cane lightly against the floor, the dull sound echoing twice. "My words aren't meant to be memorized," he said slowly. "They're meant to be understood, felt." Seeing the confusion on her face, he sighed again, a trace of helplessness in his tone. Still, she was the only suitable successor the village had. If she didn't understand, then he would simply have to teach her more carefully. "Mei, when you looked through Matsuda Yusaku's file, you also reviewed the administrative documents Nisha brought, didn't you?" Mei nodded. "And you noticed nothing?" She frowned, thought for a moment, then shook her head. "Nothing unusual. Everything looked normal, just like always." But midway through her sentence, she froze. Her eyes sharpened, and her voice grew heavier. Everything looked normal. The administrative department was, on the surface, just a support unit that handled document flow, summaries, and archiving. But in reality, it sat at the center of information exchange. It processed daily reports from every department, some of which inevitably contained sensitive material. By all logic, it should have been under the direct control of the Mizukage. Yet the Mizukage had no interest in such matters, and, over time, the department naturally fell under Genji's authority. Genji nodded. Exactly. Everything was normal. Anbu operations, normal. Jonin assignments, normal. Even the Mizukage's guard and barrier teams, normal. He paused slightly, then added, "Which means the Mizukage hasn't mobilized any of them. He hasn't acted. He knows nothing." He continued in a calm, measured tone. "The village is like a web. Every department is connected. Pull one thread and the entire structure responds, if you understand even. One node clearly, you can infer the movements of the rest." The administrative department might seem insignificant, but that was precisely why others ignored it. Most people focused on visible power, the Anbu, elite squads, combat units. But Genji held more than that. Over decades, he had built a network of information, cross-referencing different channels until the entire village lay mapped before him. Nothing of significance could move without him. Seeing the realization dawn in Mei's eyes, Genji gave a satisfied nod. Now you understand. This is what I meant. You must see the bigger picture, but never overlook the smallest details. Only then can you truly grasp the truth. He looked at her steadily. That is what it takes to become a Kage. Chapter 14. Hockey. When Yusaku followed Ganbi into the training grounds beneath Genji's residence, his eyes widened slightly.
He had expected it to be large, but the reality still exceeded his expectations. The underground space was brightly lit by rows of ceiling lamps. The training field itself was vast, nearly the size of a football pitch, with a height of 7 to 8 meters. Thick, load-bearing pillars stood in the center, while the surrounding walls were reinforced with metal plating. Even the edges were decorated with potted greenery. It reminded Yusaku of an underground mall from his previous life, just a bit less grand. This old man really knows how to spend. And this was only one facility in Genji's residence. After years of influence in Kirigakure, there was no way this was his only training base. Clearly, the old man had invested deeply in such preparations. Ganbi noticed Yusaku's reaction and smirked. "This is where we, Lord Genji's guards, train daily. Ordinary people don't get to set foot here." "Oh, so being a guard makes you special now?" Yusaku shot him a glance, silently mocking him. Though Ganbi didn't know the exact thought, he could tell it wasn't flattering. His expression darkened, but he held back, saving it for the fight. "You'll regret that look soon enough." He had already decided, once the match began, he would crush this arrogant brat head-on. Yusaku scanned the area and asked casually, "If we fight here, the noise won't attract attention, right?" "It won't," Ganbi replied coldly. "There's a barrier around the entire basement." Yusaku raised a brow. "Genji keeps a barrier team at home?" When Ganbi nodded, Yusaku was genuinely surprised. A private barrier unit? For someone like him, a mere administrative chūnin, his salary barely covered himself. Meanwhile, this old man casually maintained an entire barrier setup. No wonder he stands on equal footing with the Mizukage. "That works," Yusaku said. After all, his newly acquired ice ability wasn't exactly subtle. A short while later, Mei arrived, supporting Genji as they slowly descended. The moment she stepped in, she tossed a bottle toward Yusaku. "Here." "Thanks." Yusaku caught it and weighed it in his hand, the half-full bottle sloshing gently. With a thought, frost spread across his arm. A chill instantly filled the underground space, lowering the temperature noticeably. Fine droplets condensed on the bottle's surface. He pulled the cork and took a swig. The icy, bitter taste exploded across his palate, sliding down his throat. A satisfied expression spread across his face. Ganbi couldn't help but glance over, muttering under his breath, "A ninja who drinks. What a disgrace." His voice was quiet, but in the enclosed space, it carried clearly. Yusaku tilted his head slightly, but didn't bother arguing. Yeah, a disgrace, sure. At the entrance, Genji frowned slightly. "Yusaku, do you enjoy drinking?" "Just a way to relieve stress," Yusaku replied calmly. In a place like Kirigakure, where death could come without warning, he had carried immense pressure for years. Before the system awakened, there had been no one to confide in, so he developed the habit. A drink or two before sleep, just enough to take the edge off. Genji gave a faint, almost imperceptible shake of his head and said nothing more. Mei stepped forward, her sharp gaze sweeping across the two men facing each other. "This is just a spar," she said firmly, "not a fight to the death. If things get dangerous, I will step in immediately. The result will be decided by Lord Genji. Any objections?" "None," Ganbi barked. "Works for me," Yusaku replied. For him, this fight had two purposes: claiming the system reward and testing his newfound strength. After gaining his ice ability, his power had increased significantly. But how much? That remained to be seen. And as Mei said, this wasn't life or death. Ganbi, a jonin, was the perfect sparring partner. Then Mei raised her arm high. Both Yusaku and Ganbi formed opposing hand seals. Her arm dropped sharply. "Begin!" The moment her voice fell, Ganbi drew two short blades and assumed an aggressive stance.
Just as he was about to charge, Yusaku suddenly raised his hand. "Wait!" Gonbi frowned. "Now what?" "This wine's expensive. Let me put it down first." Yusaku gave the bottle a casual shake. Gonbi sighed, exasperated, but didn't lower his guard in the slightest. Ninjas were, by nature, deceitful. If it helped complete the mission, tricks and misdirection were expected. He jerked his chin toward Yusaku, eyes locked on him, ready for anything. There was no table in the training ground, so Yusaku could only set the bottle down by the wall. As he straightened up, his gaze fell on the nearby potted plants. On a whim, he plucked a handful of leaves. Holding them before his mouth, he opened his palm and blew gently. The leaves fluttered, and a chill surged forth. Frost spread rapidly, linking the leaves together as crystalline ice formed around them, shaping itself into a crude, uneven ice blade. Gonbi frowned at the casual display.
"Kid, you're using that as a weapon? Looking down on me?" The technique itself, forming a blade without hand seals, was impressive, but ice was still just ice. How durable could it really be? How could it possibly stand against the steel blades in his hands? Yusaku returned to his spot, gave the ice blade a few light swings, and nodded to himself. Not bad. He looked at Gonbi and said calmly, "This will do. Don't underestimate my ice." Then, Gonbi gripped both blades tightly, his foot stomping hard against the ground as he burst forward. After images trailed behind him as he closed the distance in an instant. "Then I'll shatter that pathetic ice of yours." His twin blades flashed in silver arcs through the air. Clang! A sharp metallic sound rang out. Gonbi froze for a split second, staring at the weapon that had blocked both his strikes. How is that possible? Just ice, and it stopped his blades? Before he could process it, a powerful force surged through his weapons. What strength! He looked up and saw Yusaku's faint smile. The force suddenly intensified. Gonbi was sent flying backward, skidding more than 10 meters before finally stopping, his feet carving deep grooves into the ground. Gonbi," Yusaku said with a grin, "looks like you couldn't break my blade after all." With his current mastery, the ice he created couldn't compare to the legendary strength of true steel, certainly not on its own. But he had something else, armament hockey. By coating the ice in hockey, he drastically enhanced its durability and hardness, more than enough to clash head-on with real weapons. Not a problem at all. Beside them, Mei narrowed her eyes.
He's only a chūnin, yet he blocked Gonbi-senpai's strike, so he really was hiding his strength. Gonbi hadn't used his full power, but even so, the result was shocking. The gap between chūnin and jonin wasn't something that could be measured in simple numbers. Combat instinct, experience, chakra reserves, mastered techniques, on every level, it was usually a crushing difference. And yet? Nearby, Genji watched quietly before speaking. "Mei, who do you think will win?" "Gonbi-senpai," she answered without hesitation. Even if Matsuda Yusaku possesses ice release and a no-hand sign technique, the gap between them is still like heaven and earth. She paused, then glanced at him. "And what about you, Genji-sama?" Chapter 15. The Power of the Ice Fruit. Inside the training ground, Yusaku's expression sharpened. Staring at Gonbi, who had just regained his footing, he raised his ice blade and slashed downward. A thunderous rumble erupted. Cold air exploded outward as ice crystals formed from nothing. With a single swing, a massive wall of ice surged forward like a tidal wave, crashing toward Gonbi. The moment it appeared, the temperature in the entire underground arena plummeted. Is that all? Facing a wall of ice that nearly blocked his entire field of vision, Gonbi showed no trace of panic. He gathered chakra, channeling it into both blades. Just as the ice wall closed in, he swung. 2 invisible slashes burst forth, striking the ice head-on. Boom! The massive wall shattered instantly, exploding into countless glittering shards. Ice fragments danced in the air, reflecting the overhead lights like drifting crystals. Through the falling frost, Yusaku was already there. Appearing within the debris, his blade descended. Gonbi wasn't surprised in the slightest. "I knew you'd do that." His expression hardened. One blade rose to block the strike, while the other thrust straight toward Yusaku's chest. At the moment the blade was about to pierce him, Yusaku calmly raised his hand. Clang! The blade struck his palm. Ganbi's eyes widened. It felt like stabbing steel. So hard? He glanced closely. Yusaku hadn't used any visible body-hardening technique. How could a human hand be this durable? Even without full force, stopping that strike with bare flesh meant his physical strength was far beyond normal. Before Ganbi could react, Yusaku clenched his hand. Crack, crack, crack! A thick layer of ice instantly spread across the blade, crawling upward at astonishing speed. In the blink of an eye, it reached Ganbi's hand. A biting chill surged through his arm. Looking down, he saw his entire hand frozen solid. And it didn't stop there. The frost continued creeping upward along his arm. Ice release! And without hand seals, this fast? Ganbi's expression darkened. He couldn't pull back. He couldn't even let go of the blade. He had anticipated the advantage of no hand sign techniques, faster casting, smoother flow, but Yusaku's execution still shocked him. This wasn't just fast, it was effortless. Bang! Ganbi suddenly knocked aside the ice blade. His second blade flashed, slashing straight toward Yusaku's neck. The attack was lightning fast, launched at point-blank range. There was no way to dodge. Ganbi's lips curled slightly. Gotcha! Even so, he instinctively held back. This was a spar, not a killing blow. But just as the blade was about to connect, it stopped. Crack! Crack! A strange sound echoed. A block of ice had formed at Yusaku's neck, seamlessly merging with his body and intercepting the strike. Thin fractures spread across its surface under the pressure. Ganbi couldn't help but marvel again. What a ridiculous ability! The moment he attacked, Yusaku created a defensive layer instantly. That speed was absurd. At that moment, Yusaku spoke casually. Ah, senpai, why only use blade techniques? No ninjutsu? If I use ninjutsu, Ganbi replied through clenched teeth, this won't be a spar anymore. With a sharp twist of his arm, crack! The ice encasing his limb shattered. A surge of chakra burst from his blade, cleaving through the remaining frost. At the same time, Yusaku felt a sharp sting in his palm. Ganbi spun his wrist, pulling both blades free before retreating several steps in one motion. If he stayed frozen any longer, his arm would suffer real damage. Breaking free was the only option. He glanced at Yusaku's hand, still intact. Only then did he relax slightly. Genji valued this young man highly. Injuring him would cause trouble. Your body, Ganbi said slowly, narrowing his eyes. Since when does a chūnin have that level of physical ability? Yusaku glanced at his palm. A shallow cut had opened, blood seeping through torn skin. It was from the moment Ganbi shattered the ice. Not serious. It wouldn't affect the fight. Compared to your blade work, senpai, Yusaku said with a faint smile, I'm still lacking. In truth, he hadn't used his full advantage yet. Elementalization. But revealing that now would only complicate things. After all, in Kirigakure, abilities similar to pseudo-elemental bodies already existed, like the techniques of the Hozuki clan. Still, what he possessed was on an entirely different level. Yusaku had reacted the instant he caught the glint in Ganbi's blade, hardening his palm with armament haki and taking the strike head-on. But his haki was still too weak. It blocked most of the damage, but not all. He'd still been cut. Raising his hand, he turned his palm toward Ganbi. See, senpai? I'm injured. Ganbi narrowed his eyes. The wound was real. Frost had already formed over it, sealing the bleeding. For a moment, he couldn't help but think again. No hand sign techniques really are absurdly convenient, especially in Yusaku's case. The way he used them, effortless, instantaneous, was practically second nature. From their brief exchange, Ganbi had already judged it clearly. Aside from that unnaturally tough body, Yusaku's combat experience, taijutsu, and overall fundamentals were still at a chūnin level, nothing exceptional. But once combined with ice release and no hand sign casting, it was like adding wings to a tiger. Enough to contend with a seasoned jonin like him. If he let his guard down even slightly, he might actually lose. Impressive. The younger generation truly is something else. The contempt in Gonbi's eyes faded, replaced with genuine focus. He was a jonin, a veteran, and a full generation older. If he lost here, he'd never live it down. Yusaku gripped his ice blade, eyes fixed on Gonbi. Then something clicked in his mind. He pointed at Gonbi's weapons. "Senpai, those blades of yours, don't tell me they're made from chakra-conducting metal?" "Correct!" Gonbi lifted his twin blades, pride evident in his voice. "I wasn't born a ninja. I come from a samurai lineage. My ninjutsu is decent, but nothing special compared to others. The one thing I excel at is the sword." Yusaku raised a brow. "When you say nothing special, you mean by jonin standards, right?" "Of course," Gonbi replied confidently. "I'm a jonin, and a jonin has no weaknesses." At the edge of the training ground, Mei watched quietly beside Genji. "I know Gonbi-senpai's strength well," she said. "We've sparred more than once." Her gaze shifted to Yusaku. As for Matsuda Yusaku, his records list him as a sensory-type ninja. Hard-working, yes, but nothing remarkable. He's remained a chūnin all these years. Even during the Third Great Ninja War, his contributions were mostly reconnaissance missions. She paused briefly. "No matter how you look at it, he shouldn't be Gonbi-senpai's opponent." And yet, her tone turned subtle, tinged with both surprise and curiosity. Even without killing intent, the fact that Yusaku is slightly suppressing Gonbi-senpai is astonishing. Beside her, Genji simply shook his head, offering no immediate comment. Whether Gonbi won, or Yusaku did, neither outcome would surprise him. If Gonbi won, it was only natural. He was a jonin after all. But if Yusaku won, that wouldn't be unexpected either. A man who had hidden his strength for years, only to reveal it all at once, past records no longer held meaning. Either result was possible. That was his conclusion. Slowly, the old man opened his narrowed eyes, gaze settling on the two figures in the center of the arena. "Matsuda Yusaku, let me see just how far you can go." Chapter 16, You're Next. "Senpai, your chakra nature, it's wind, isn't it?" After glancing at the small cut on his palm, Yusaku looked up at Gonbi, who was now fully on guard. The twin blades in Gonbi's hands shimmered as chakra surged along them, stabilizing into extended forms. What were once short wakizashi-length blades now stretched into something closer to full-length swords. "Correct. No wonder they're so sharp," Yusaku said calmly. "Sharp enough to cut me." Wind nature chakra, once refined, possessed extreme cutting power, and as a jonin, Gonbi clearly had mastery over its nature transformation. With extended reach and enhanced sharpness, he was now far more dangerous than before. He was serious. But what Yusaku did next surprised everyone present. Gonbi, Mei, even Genji. He casually tossed his ice blade aside. Crash! The weapon shattered on impact, scattering into glittering shards across the ground. Mei frowned slightly. Gonbi-senpai is already taking this seriously, and he drops his weapon now? What is he thinking? Beside her, Genji shook his head. I don't know, but he doesn't look like he's surrendering. Then he must have something else in mind. Gonbi's eyes flashed with anger. He had raised his guard, prepared for a real fight, and Yusaku discarded his weapon? It felt like an insult. But just as quickly, Gonbi suppressed his anger. Looking at Yusaku's face beneath those sunglasses, there was no carelessness, only focus. So, this is deliberate. What are you planning? Gonbi finally asked. Yusaku brought his fists up in front of him. Ice gloves. A faint whisper left his lips as cold mist curled outward. In an instant, frost wrapped around his hands, forming a translucent layer of ice. Under the overhead lights, his fists gleamed like polished crystal. Then, armament hockey coated over them. "Senpai," Yusaku said casually, "in Kirigakure, most ninja are skilled with blades because of the 7 ninja swords. But my swordsmanship, just average. In front of someone like you, I'd only embarrass myself. So instead," he smiled faintly, "I'll use what I'm better at." Ganbi narrowed his eyes, gaze fixed on Yusaku's fists. For some reason, they didn't look like flesh anymore. They looked like ice. "Being able to clash blades with me already proves your swordsmanship isn't bad," Ganbi said. "So, you're better with your fists?" Yusaku raised a brow, confidence flickering across his face. But he didn't answer. Instead, he moved. His foot struck the ground as he shot forward like a bullet. "Careful, senpai!" "The one who should be careful is you, brat!" Ganbi charged head-on, both blades slashing toward Yusaku's chest and waist. Then, something changed. Ganbi suddenly felt his body lurch upward. Beneath his left foot, ice surged from the ground, lifting him abruptly. At the same time, his right foot was frozen in place, locked to the ground by solid ice. His balance broke instantly. His body pitched forward, and his blades went offline. You can do that? Under normal circumstances, breaking free would have been effortless. But in the middle of combat, Yusaku gave him no such chance. Slipping past the distorted blade trajectory, Yusaku stepped in and drove his fist straight into Ganbi's chest. The moment the punch landed, Ganbi heard it, a faint, chilling sound. Crack. A fracture. A violent shock rippled through Ganbi's body. His organs churned, and a piercing pain twisted through his chest. How can one punch hit this hard? Under the force of Yusaku's strike, Ganbi was blasted backward, but his right foot was still frozen to the ground, anchoring him in place. Cracks spread across the ice beneath him. "Then take another one!" Yusaku didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and closed the distance instantly. His second punch was already primed. Boom! This one slammed into Ganbi's abdomen, the force so overwhelming that half of Yusaku's fist visibly sank into his body. Crack, crack, crack! The ice binding Ganbi's foot shattered at last. His body bent like a shrimp, flying backward in a distorted arc. But this time, there was no clean recovery. The 2 punches had disrupted everything. Pain flooded his nerves, leaving him unable to react in time. He skidded across the ground for several meters before finally stopping. Frost had already spread across his chest and abdomen, numbing his body and draining his heat. Swallowing back the bile rising in his throat, Ganbi struggled to get up. "Ice hockey," Yusaku's calm voice echoed. In his hand, a sphere of dense, chilling ice condensed into existence. This wasn't ordinary ice. It was compressed cold. Energy from the ice fruit packed tightly together. The moment it made contact, it would erupt and freeze everything in its range. The ice sphere shot forward, carving a graceful arc through the air. At the last moment, Ganbi barely managed to prop himself up and dodge. The sphere struck the ground in front of him. "Even if you dodged," Yusaku's voice trailed. Then, the ice exploded. A surge of freezing energy burst outward, swallowing everything in its path. Ganbi's fleeting relief hadn't even faded when his vision filled with rushing frost. The temperature in the entire underground arena plummeted. At the center of the field, a massive crystalline sphere of ice appeared. Over 3 meters tall, perfectly clear, gleaming under the lights. And inside, Ganbi, frozen in place. Even the faint smile on his face was locked in that instant. "You're still within the capture range," Yusaku's voice finished softly. At the edge of the arena, Mei stared, stunned. So easily. And that kind of attack, that's not even how a ninja fights.
In typical shinobi combat, even when using ninjutsu, techniques were often channeled through hand seals and released via the mouth, the chakra flow more stable and direct. But Yusaku, with no hand seals at all, was deploying ice release freely, seamlessly, at will. From a combat standpoint, it was absurdly efficient. Beside her, Genji slowly opened one eye, the appreciation in his gaze deepening. In the end, among shinobi, strength was everything. "The match is decided," he said calmly. "May, announce it." May took a steady breath and raised her voice. "The sparring match is over." She looked toward the center. "The winner, Matsuda Yusaku." Yusaku turned, a faint smile forming on his lips. His victory wasn't just due to his mastery of the ice fruit. Ganbi had never encountered such an ability before. He simply wasn't used to it. But more importantly, shinobi defenses were fragile. Most of them could be killed by a single kunai. Take Ganbi. Just 2 punches had staggered him enough to lock him in place. If this were the world of pirates, with their monstrous physiques, that level of damage would barely count as a scratch. They'd get back up and keep fighting. Yusaku tilted his head slightly. Through frost-covered lenses, his gaze settled on Genji. In his eyes, it was as if something greater was already within reach. A faint, dangerous smile curved his lips. "You're next." Chapter 17. One Step to the Finish. Though Genji was advanced in years, he was still a shinobi, and more importantly, a man who had survived decades at the center of political storms. His instincts were razor-sharp. The moment he felt Yusaku's gaze, he studied him closely. Even through the sunglasses, even with frost still clinging to his face, Genji could see it. "So, you want to fight me?" A faint thought crossed his mind. Good, he had already expected this. As May announced the result, Ganbi, still trapped inside the massive ice sphere, reacted. The chakra within his twin blades erupted. Boom! Boom! 2 enormous arcs of chakra surged outward, slicing through the ice. Deep, intersecting cuts appeared across the frozen sphere. With those openings, Ganbi found his escape. Cracks spread rapidly. Crack, crack, crack. In an instant, fractures covered the entire structure. Then, the ice exploded. Chunks of varying sizes scattered across the training ground, slamming into the floor and ceiling with sharp, echoing sounds. Amid the storm of shards, Ganbi emerged. His body was flushed red from the cold, but his expression remained firm. He crushed the ice beneath his foot and looked around. Something felt off. The atmosphere had changed. "Ganbi-senpai," May said calmly, "you lost this match." "What?" Ganbi's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at her. She nodded. "Matsuda Yusaku is the winner." Hearing it again, Ganbi slowly turned toward Yusaku. "That was it? I was frozen for a moment, and that's a loss?" His gaze shifted to Genji, silently asking for confirmation. Genji spoke in his usual slow tone. "Ganbi, you lost. I know you're dissatisfied, but once you were frozen, did you truly have any chance to counterattack? If this had been a real battle," he paused, "you'd already be dead." Ganbi clenched his fists. "But this wasn't a life-or-death fight." "Genji-sama," he said bitterly, "I didn't use my full strength. And Yusaku clearly didn't either." Genji didn't respond. Instead, Ganbi looked directly at Yusaku, seeking the truth. Yusaku simply nodded. No words. That was enough. The tension drained from Ganbi like air from a punctured balloon. He let out a bitter laugh and walked toward Genji. "I lost." His voice was heavy. "As your guard, I failed. I forced you into a position where you must fight personally. Please punish me." He knew Genji's condition better than anyone. The old man had no real combat strength left. If anything happened to him, it wouldn't just be a personal loss. It would shake the entire faction, even Kirigakure itself. Regret filled Ganbi's chest. "I shouldn't have held back." Genji, however, waved a hand lightly. "There's no failure here. I'm only in my 80s, still in my prime for adventure. His tone was calm, almost teasing. Don't underestimate me just because I'm old. Yes, Genji-sama. At that moment, a notification rang out in Yusaku's mind. Notice, congratulations, host has defeated Momonga Rokushiki. Tekkai delivered. Please verify. A surge of power suddenly appeared within his body. At the same time, a strange, profound understanding surfaced in his mind. Following that insight, he realized he had already mastered it. Tekkai. Not only that, the system seemed to have reinforced his body to ensure he could use it properly. There's a bonus, too? Yusaku closed his eyes, carefully sensing the changes within himself. Moments later, he opened them again.
A sharp glint flashed across his gaze. This wasn't an illusion. His strength had increased by more than double, far beyond what it had been just moments ago. A grin slowly spread across his face. This system, blind as it is, still delivers where it counts. Yusaku had originally been worried that his body wouldn't be strong enough to support a technique like Tekkai, but the system simply skipped all the limitations. A direct infusion, instant mastery. His body had been pushed straight to the required level. Not bad at all. He suppressed the excitement rising in his chest, trying to keep his expression under control. But when he looked at Genji again, the faint curve at his lips refused to disappear. Next is you, Genji. Very well. Genji nodded and slowly stepped toward the center of the training ground, leaning on his cane. But after only 2 steps, Mei moved in front of him. Genji-sama, with your condition, there's no need to push yourself. Her gaze shifted to Yusaku, sharp and challenging, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Matsuda Yusaku, if you really want to fight Genji-sama, then get through me first. Beat me and I'll let you challenge him. Her bloodline limit was a secret, but her strength wasn't. Everyone in the village knew she stood at the very peak of the younger generation, stronger than most jonin, even comparable to a Kage. She was clearly trying to make him back down. But Yusaku didn't hesitate at all. Sure, he opened the system interface without a second thought. A new side quest appeared. Defeat Jian. Reward Soru. Jian was Mei, and Mei was Jian. Since he had already obtained Tekkai and his strength had surged, he might as well go one step further and take Soru too. He knew how strong Mei was, but if he didn't try, how would he know the result? Besides, she was the perfect opponent to test his newly enhanced body. Mei's smile stiffened slightly, her eyes turning colder. So he really thought he could challenge her now, just because he had ice release and no hand sign techniques? Fine. She would personally crush that arrogance. Ganbi-senpai, take Genji-sama and leave. Ganbi's expression tightened. She was serious. Genji glanced at her, then said slowly, "Don't go too far." "Don't worry," Mei replied calmly. "I know my limits." Genji nodded and turned to leave. Ganbi stepped forward, muttered an apology, and directly lifted the old man onto his back. In just a few steps, they reached the exit. The heavy door slammed shut. Only then did Ganbi breathe out. Mei's bloodline limit was extremely dangerous, especially in a confined space like this. He had no intention of getting caught in it. Supporting Genji, the two of them stood by the door, peering inside through the small window. With them gone, Mei walked to the center of the training ground. "Matsuda Yusaku, don't think beating Ganbi-senpai means you can beat me. Even among jonin, there are levels." Yusaku scratched his head. She was clearly irritated now, but that didn't matter. He wasn't here to build a relationship. What he wanted was Soru. "I know," he said casually. "Technically speaking, even a Kage is just a jonin. And sometimes, even a genin can rise all the way to Hokage." He raised his fists, a layer of clear, gleaming ice forming over them once more. Facing the pressure steadily rising from Mei, he met it head-on without retreating. "I have full confidence in my strength. If we really fight," a faint smile appeared on his face, "I don't think I'll lose." Mei's expression darkened, her teeth clenching slightly. How arrogant. The air between them instantly tightened, as if invisible blades had been drawn. The tension in the training ground surged to its peak.
Chapter 18, Tekkai. I'll start by shattering that arrogance of yours. Mei rested one hand on her hip and pointed straight at Yusaku. Yusaku raised a brow, his gaze sweeping over her as he quietly mapped out his next move. Mei was no ordinary opponent. 2 Ketkai Genkai, top tier, even within the hidden mist. He might win, but it wouldn't be easy. Before he could finish thinking it through, Mei moved. Her hands flashed through a string of seals in an instant. Her cheeks puffed as chakra surged into her mouth. Water release, great waterfall technique! A massive sphere of water, 4 to 5 meters tall, burst forth. Ripples spread across its surface before it collapsed into a roaring torrent, surging forward like a tidal wave, ready to swallow him whole. Facing the oncoming flood, Yusaku remained calm. He extended his right hand. An ice spike shot forward, piercing straight into the rushing water. Ice time capsule! The moment ice met water, freezing energy erupted. Crack, crack, crack! Frost spread like wildfire. The surface froze first, then deeper, until in a blink the entire torrent solidified into a gleaming mass of ice. Mist shinobi specialized in water release. In battle, they either exploited existing terrain or created it themselves. Like Mei just did. But against Yusaku, that strategy was useless. Too bad, he said lightly. My ice happens to counter water. He wouldn't give her any advantage. Right then, a sharp whistle tore through the air beside him. Is that so? Mei's voice rang out. Yusaku turned, just in time to see a leg in armored greaves sweeping toward him at terrifying speed. He wasn't surprised. If he knew Mist's tactics, so did she. That water release had just been cover. He raised his arm. Tekkai! Blood surged, muscles locked, his entire body froze in place like forged steel. Thud. A dull impact echoed. Mei's lips curved slightly. She had put real force into that kick. It should have sent him crashing into the wall. But then, her expression changed. So hard? It felt like kicking iron. Pain shot up her leg.
Yusaku, meanwhile, stood his ground, feet rooted, unmoving. Tekkai's defense really is something, he grinned inwardly. Before, that kick would have crippled him. Now, he felt like he could tank bullets. No wonder so many Marines relied on it. Of course, in Tekkai, he couldn't move. Any motion would break the state. But his devil fruit didn't care. Cold erupted from his arm, ice racing up Mei's leg. Fast! She twisted mid-motion, shattering the ice with a spin. Shards scattered as her other leg came down like a hammer. This time, Yusaku didn't even bother defending. Bang! Her heel struck his head. And again, it felt like steel. What is this? 2 hits, 0 effect. Without hesitation, she kicked off his chest and flipped back, landing gracefully. Her eyes locked onto him. That hardness. What is it, taijutsu or ninjutsu? Yusaku exhaled, releasing Tekkai. His body relaxed slightly. The system had boosted him just enough to use it, but only barely. Maintaining it still strained him. Still manageable. It's a new taijutsu I developed, he said casually. Tekkai. It hardens the body like steel at the moment of impact. Mei's eyes sharpened. You developed it yourself? No wonder. That kind of defense. Even her strikes hurt. Impressive. And troublesome. Ice release nullified her terrain control. No hand sign casting made his attacks nearly instant. And now this defensive technique? This was getting difficult. Instead of attacking, she paused. Got anything else you've developed? Might as well tell me. I do. Yusaku nodded, then shook his head. But they're not finished yet. Not usable in real combat. Mei narrowed her eyes. She had already taken him seriously. Apparently, not enough. Yusaku, meanwhile, was just laying groundwork for the rest of the 6 powers. He looked at her, a faint smile forming. One more skill, and it's mine. He turned slightly, raising his arm. The upper arm stayed still while the forearm lifted, palm flattening like a blade, aimed at Mei. Ice block. Frost exploded across his arm, jagged ice forming, sharp and gleaming with killing intent.
He drew in strength and thrust forward. Pheasant beak! With Yusaku's shout, his right arm surged forward, shaping itself into a massive bird's head, the rest of its body following in a sweeping burst. The ice bird gleamed like crystal, vivid and lifelike. Its feathers were rough in detail, hurriedly formed, but its presence was overwhelming. As the sharp beak lunged toward me, the bird spread its wings. Those wings were far more refined, each feather thin as a blade, glinting with a deadly sheen. Fully extended, they covered nearly half the training ground, sealing off Mi's escape routes. Seeing this, Mi's eyes hardened. Her hands flashed through seals, cheeks swelling with chakra. Lava release, melting apparition technique. A stream of pale green viscous acid poured from her mouth, instantly swelling into a massive wave that crashed into the incoming ice bird. The moment the two collided, white smoke billowed where acid met ice. The bird's surface hissed and bubbled, rapidly corroding under the assault. At the same time, Mi's acid visibly cooled, its movement slowing slightly under the invading chill. But she kept pouring chakra into it.
The acid wave forced the ice bird to a halt, then swallowed it whole. A sharp, acrid stench filled the training ground. May wiped the trace of acid from her lips, a faint smile forming. My lava release produces highly corrosive acid. Its freezing point is far lower than ordinary water. Your ice can't freeze it. As her voice fell, the massive ice bird began collapsing under the corrosion, shrinking by meters in mere moments. Yusaku waved a hand in front of his nose, frowning slightly at the smell. Then his gaze shifted from the dissolving acid to May herself. I see. No wonder someone like her, beautiful, powerful, was still single. With an ability like that, who would dare get close? Especially the way she just spat acid. One slip, and her partner would be melted down to nothing. He clicked his tongue inwardly, then looked back at the spreading acid. After mixing with melted ice, its color had lightened, thinning as it flowed outward. Wherever it passed, the ground sizzled and corroded, white smoke rising in thin trails. Yusaku lowered his gaze. The acid was already creeping toward him. Even diluted, its corrosive power was still terrifying. Cold surged across nearly half his body. Frost spread as he released a wave of freezing energy toward the advancing acid. The flow slowed. Water within the acid began to crystallize, tiny ice particles forming throughout. The portion closest to him froze entirely, its surface coated in a pale layer of frost. Seeing this, Yusaku's eyes narrowed slightly. A thought began to take shape.